For joining
Yes.
me.
Yes, of course. Quick turnaround after Norwalk, but happy to be here.
You just gave a lecture and a workshop. We'll talk about that more in a bit. But so in this episode, we're going to in the first hour, we're going to spend talking about news and events that happened since our last forecast episode and the astrology that coincided with some of those news events. Then in the second half of this episode, we're going to do a deep dive into the astrology of June of 2025, looking at some of the major planetary alignments that are going to be happening over the course of the next 4 weeks. So, as always, there'll be timestamps on the podcast website or below this video on YouTube if you want to skip the news section and jump forward straight to the forecast. But otherwise, before we get to the news section, I wanted to give a quick overview of the astrology of the month, just to give you a preview of what we're going to be talking about later in this episode. All right, so here is the planetary movements calendar that shows where the planets will start at the beginning of the month and how far through the signs of the zodiac they'll get by the end of the month. And here's the planetary aspects calendar that was put together by Madeline DeCoates of honeycomb.co, where they do beautiful almanacs and other illustrations like this one. So this shows the peak of some of the different aspects that we're going to be looking at this month, including the Mars-Uranus square around the 15th, or some other positive aspects like the Venus-Jupiter sextile that takes place around June 4th and June 5th. So moving on, one of the big things this month is the Venus retrograde. The extended Venus retrograde period is finally going to end once Venus departs from the sign of Aries, the sign it went retrograde in, and moves into Taurus on June 5th. We also have the end of the extended Mars retrograde period when Mars finally departs from Leo, the sign it went retrograde in way back in December, and moves into Virgo in the middle of June. Here's the planetary alignments calendar for this month that shows some of the major aspects and ingresses and lunations. So we open the month, like I said, with Venus departing from Aries finally and moving into Taurus on June 6th. Then on June 8th, Mercury enters Cancer. The following day, Jupiter also enters Cancer on June 9th, moving into the sign of its exaltation. 2 days later, we get a lunation that's actually ruled by Jupiter when we have a full moon in the sign of Sagittarius on the 11th. Then the following week, we have a Mars Uranus square and a Jupiter Saturn square happening on the same day on June 15th. 2 days later, Mars departs from Leo and moves into Virgo, which is great because it's finally ending that long retrograde period on that day. Then the following day, Jupiter in the sky squares the planet Neptune, which is still in early Aries. 2 days later, the sun moves into Cancer, hitting the summer solstice in the northern hemisphere. The following week, the sun conjoins Jupiter on the 24th. Then we get our second lunation of the month, which is a new moon in the sign of Cancer on the 25th. Mercury moves into Leo on the 26th. And then finally, our last major aspect of the month is Mercury opposes Pluto on the 29th of June. So those are some of the major aspects and alignments that we're going to talk about in this episode later on once we get to the forecast section in the second half. All right, so you just got back from the Northwest Astrology Conference, which is a big conference in Seattle that happened over the past week. So thanks a lot for joining me and filling in for Austin while he's away writing his long-awaited book on the Decans or revising it for the second edition. How was the conference? How did Norwalk go?
It was awesome. It's always so good to see everyone. Astrology conferences are the kind of thing where you see someone suddenly that you haven't seen since 7 years ago, some other conference, and it's like you just pick back up talking, and it's really lovely. So I saw a lot of old connections, made some new connections. Thank you to everyone, podcast listeners and mailing list people, for coming up to me and saying hi. It's always nice to hear who's listening because when you're recording most episodes or our monthly electional podcast, all I see is you, Chris, and the wall in front of me. I don't know who's listening. No, I'm
I
happy to
mean, let's
see.
not have to say that too emphatically here.
It's just you.
Yeah.
No, but you never know who's listening. And so it's really lovely for people to come up, at conferences and be like, hey, I listened to your podcast. I love it. It's really gratifying. So there was a lot of that. Workshop went great. I had the pre-conference on Thursday, the 5-hour one, Zodiac releasing from Spirit, and that was fun. Really great examples, and I'm glad that other people could share that with me. And then I had a Sunday lecture about finding where people, circumstances where people met partners in the chart, romantic partners. Also, fun examples. I'm really all about the fun examples.
Yeah, I want to, hopefully we can get that released on your website sometime soon so people can buy the recording there.
Yeah, we don't have it back yet, but as soon as we have it back, we'll try to turn it around and get it up on my website. So keep an eye out for that. You can join my mailing list, and I'll make an announcement as to when it's available. But yeah, fun times. It's really
Well,
awesome for Laura and the staff and volunteers to keep this happening every single year because it's the only astrology conference that happens every year.
right, for sure. And at one
Yeah.
point, Saturn like switched over like right in the middle of the conference into Aries, right?
Yeah, I told you about that later. It was Saturday night, right? Just recently that Saturn went into Aries. And of course, everyone in the lobby got a notification on
Why?
their phone at the same time saying
Why?
Saturn is now in Aries. And there was just like this loud, like, Saturn's in Aries now, woo, like cheer from the entire lobby,
Right.
which cracks me up to be cheering Saturn going anywhere, but like astrologers like ingresses, and specifically because you all speak the same language, and so you can all cheer it at the same time. But it's also funny because Saturn specifically, by the time it's going into a new sign, it's already been somewhere else for like 2.5 years, and so everyone's just like ready for it to go wherever else, somewhere else.
Right. I mean, I have to imagine that there's a lot of very exuberant Pisces, but that must have been a
Yeah.
much more quiet, like wistful woo for the Aries people.
I saw some exuberant woos even from the Saturn and Aries people.
All right. Well, they don't know what they're in for then. Um, all right, cool. Well, that sounds fun. That's amazing. That conference, Northwest Astrology Conference, and yeah, all right. So why don't we jump into talking about some of the news since the last forecast? So I kind of checked out and I did a digital detox this month,
Why is it not
partially because
working
I
the
wanted to
way it
focus
should?
on
Why?
researching the big Mesopotamian astrology episode that I did, that I finally just released recently, and I spent like 3 weeks intensely researching that. So I wasn't following news as closely this month as in other months, but I did notice some notable news stories that had astrological correlations. I'm not going to attempt to cover all of the news this month, but I just point out a few stories and ones that I specifically saw that there was an interesting astrological connection that I wanted to discuss.
Mhm.
All right, so go through chronologically because I wrote my notes down chronologically. The first major story that I noticed in the news was right at the beginning of the month, Pluto stationed retrograde in Aquarius. It got to like, what, 3 degrees of Aquarius, which is as far into Aquarius as it has gotten at this point. And then it's stationed retrograde, which is always like a sort of like exclamation mark next to the planet, where you really get a sense for what that transit is all about during those station points, because usually there's some notable event that happens. So I was paying attention to that, and I did see a news story that came out on May 2nd. The Atlantic wrote an article that was titled, quote, "The worst internet research ethics violation I have ever seen." And then the subtitle was, "The most persuasive people on a popular subreddit turned out to be a front for a secret AI experiment." And what happened was there was a group of researchers based at the University of Zurich who wanted to find out whether AI generated responses could be used to change people's mind. And they went to this popular subreddit on Reddit, which is called Change My View, where somebody will state like a position that they have, like a strongly held position about something, and then other people will post, and they'll post their best arguments, attempting to provide like the other point of view and attempting to change the person's mind. And it's a subreddit that's been around for a while, and it's kind of fun because sometimes you'll see people come in with like really strongly held opinion about something, but then they'll be argued to changing their point of view based on if somebody has like a really persuasive argument that they hadn't heard before. So that's always been fun as a part of Reddit. But then apparently this group of researchers, what they did is they used AI to generate comments on that subreddit where they actively tried to change people's minds about things over the course of a 4-month period. And by the end of it, they had posted more than 1,000 AI generated comments where they not only made up arguments, like trying to change people's point of view, but they also made up like elaborate backstories for the people where they would tell like a personal story that somehow connected to the event that made it look more immersive and ultimately deceptive. And then later they only disclosed it once it was discovered. So it was this sudden, really startling example of how AI is already being used in some instances potentially to control or manipulate people. And this was just like a research project, evidently one that people were saying was very unethical. But you can imagine if that's happening with like that one isolated incident, how that's already being applied in other areas potentially, and that this was just like a preview of that in some sense.
Absolutely. Anytime there's a planetary station, it emphasizes further those qualities and what that transit is about. And Pluto through Aquarius certainly can be like the dark side of technology. What that also makes me think of, kind of tangentially, is Alan Turing and like the Turing test about like if someone is a human being, like how to tell if someone
Right.
is a real human being. I think most of his tech stuff in his chart is that large Gemini stellium in his chart, but he has Uranus at almost 3 Aquarius. And so Pluto's
Mm,
just stationed right on top of that, I just noticed. And yeah, it's like, how do you tell if someone is real or technologically made up? So that's kind of fascinating synastry there. Um,
right.
yeah,
That we're
yeah,
like we're like way beyond the Turing test at this point because
right.
humans in many instances like can't tell the difference between what is AI generated versus what's not. And that was the whole point of the Turing test is like if a human can't tell that something is a robot, then the robot's like passed the test.
Exactly. Yeah, which sounds a lot like this. But yeah, it's terrible. I have also missed a lot of the news the past month because I was getting my, lecture and workshop ready and very much focused on that. But I did see that headline go by and I was like, oh, that's terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible, but fascinating.
Right. Yeah. I just opened my phone and saw that, and it was like, that's terrible. And then closed my phone, and I was like,
Which we
that's
do a lot
enough.
these days. Yeah.
Right. That's enough internet for today.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and it also ties in with the Saturn Neptune, which we'll come back to later in the news stories, which is just the Saturn Neptune we had always anticipated and interpreted archetypally as the ability to struggle to tell the difference between what's real and what's not real. And this is a good example of that, both with Pluto and Aquarius and like using AI to manipulate people, but also that we've entered into a period where humans are like struggling for the first time truly to tell the difference between what's artificial intelligence versus what's not. And
Hmm.
yeah, we'll come back to that more later.
Yeah.
All right, other major news story. We had a new pope was elected on May 8th. So this was the first time that American had been elected as a pope. His name is Robert Prevost, who's now Pope Leo the 14th. He was born September 14th, 1955 in Chicago. We unfortunately don't have a birth time, so we can't look at the houses or other things like that. Although if somebody wants to ask him, like shout out to you if anybody gets a chance to ask him his birth time or rising sign. But one of the things I noticed as soon as he was elected and as soon as his chart was cast is that he has this large Virgo stellium that at least consists of Mars at 11 Virgo, the Sun at 21 Virgo, and Venus at 24 Virgo. The moon is probably also there as well because it's at 1 degree of Virgo at noon that day. So if he was born anytime, essentially in like the second half of the day, then he also has the moon in Virgo. And one of the things that I immediately thought of was we just had the first lunar eclipse in Virgo only like a month and a half ago in March, where we had a lunar eclipse at, I believe it was like late 23 degrees of Virgo. So that was right on top of his Venus and very close to his sun. And I thought that was an excellent example of how eclipses sometimes foreshadow events that are about to take place. And sometimes it foreshadows it just like a little ahead of time, like a week or two ahead of time. But sometimes there's this lag time where it can be a bit longer than that. But nonetheless, it's almost like giving you a preview of something that's really big and life changing that's about to take place, even if you're not aware of it, or even if the effect of that isn't clear at the time. But this was a really good example of that.
Absolutely. I often tell people, with the eclipse cycles in the same signs for about a year and a half at a time, it's not the case that each and every eclipse will mean something meaningful to a person if it hits something in your chart, but reliably within that series, it will. So it can, sometimes it clusters really tightly around an actual eclipse date, but at other times it's just like in that series because it's sort of setting it in motion for there to be some important changes in that area of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also, it's like you have to remember that these eclipses in Virgo are going to be happening in 6 month increments for the next like year and a half through late 2026, all the way until 2027. So it was not just foreshadowing his rise to prominence, but also like the first year or almost like 2 years of his being Pope and all of the things that he does in setting the stage for his new this new era of his life are going to be partially marked by those eclipses.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so this funny thing I found, how everyone was talking about how eerie it was that the movie Conclave is like an Oscar nominated movie came out about like a papal conclave. And then not that long afterwards, Pope Francis dies. And then there is, in fact, a real papal conclave.
Like everyone was watching it. It became like the number
Yeah.
one movie, I think, on Amazon for a while during the conclave itself.
Right. There were many jokes about like how this was, pretty impressive marketing and everything.
Right.
So we watched the movie Conclave together, and it's a good movie. And so I was just curious. I was thinking about that in the lead up to talking about this today, and I was like, I wonder if there was any astrological connection. So I dug up the chart for the film premiere, like the first time it premiered at the Telluride Film Festival. It was August 30th of last year in 2024. And it actually had a time for the first showing, which was 6 p.m. And there was just this crazy lineup. So look at the ascendant there at 6 p.m. I have no way of knowing if it went on time, but there were several showings after, so presumably they tried to keep it on time. This is 340 Aquarius rising, right, is the ascendant degree, with the Pluto near the ascendant and then the moon in early Leo right on the descendant there. Then, if you
At three
compare that,
degrees.
yeah, 3 degrees. Yeah, the moon's almost exactly on the ascendant there. But ascendant's 340, very important. So then, if you look at the chart for Pope Francis dying, then Pluto has moved further, right? That was the film premiere was last fall. So Pluto's moved a little further. And so if you look at where the moon is now at 322, applying to conjoin Pluto closely at 3, what is it, 46? I forgot to put my glasses on.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's
Like
like,
when Pope this is we mentioned this in the last forecast that when Pope Francis died, they released the time and it had the moon at 3 Aquarius conjunct the midheaven at 3 Aquarius conjunct Pluto at 3 Aquarius.
right. So that's really focal as well. But like moon, Pluto's like on the ascendant of that film premiere chart. It's now, before it was 3 degrees off. Now it's like right on the ascendant with the Mars on the descendant there where the moon was in the film premiere. And then you get to the papal conclave. Yeah, so that's the comparison there.
Yeah, because the ascendant of the film premiere was 3 degrees of
340.
Aquarius, and then all of that lined up basically when Pope Francis passed away at that exact degree, and then all of a sudden his death had this weird effect of like catapulting this film that had just come out in the past year into like huge number one viewership.
Right. And then further, then, they have to arrange the papal conclave, which takes a little bit of time. So once we get to that, Pluto is stationing. And so then we have the chart for we didn't catch it personally, but someone was watching and said the time for 722 when he came out, when the new pope came out, Pope Leo, and gave his
That is,
first
was
speech.
a listener is Latina who's in the live
Thank
chat
you.
today. Shout out
Oh,
to
great.
her.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for watching that. Yeah, so if you want to show the chart for that, but essentially Pluto's like stationary. Yeah, so Pluto's stationary. That's the chart for when the conclave begins. But then when they actually elect the new pope and then he comes out and speaks, it's like 4 days from stationary, right on top of that film premiere Ascendant, which is just really remarkable to me. It
Yeah.
was 7/22. Yeah, March 8th.
Right. So so yeah, like as we were saying, so Pluto is stationing all at the beginning of the month, and it's stationed right on
Right.
the ascendant of the film,
Mm-hmm.
and suddenly the film becomes like wildly popular. It already won or was nominated for some Academy Awards, so it already had a moment, but then all of a sudden it had a much bigger moment as like everybody watched it during
Mm-hmm.
this time period at the beginning of the month. So that's pretty crazy.
Right. It's pretty crazy, but it's like referring back to the film, but I also feel like the film was like foreshadowing the event. And, it's not just about the film itself, but just such a notable connection between the two was kind of like introducing like what was about to happen. And that this was like,
Right.
a huge Plutonian thing in the sense of just like it's an incredibly powerful position to be elected to.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's give some of the data for some of that because I wanted to record it for posterity since all the astrologers were like talking about it and recording some of the data. So the conclave itself began on May 7th. Here's the chart. May 7th, 2025 at 5:43 p.m. with Libra rising. And they only did voting for like 2 days because then already the following day on May 8th, 2025 at 6:08 p.m. in Vatican City, the white smoke emerged from like the chimney indicating that the new pope had been elected. And we see the ascendant at 24 degrees of Libra, and Mercury was like right on the descendant, which was kind of interesting at the time at 26 degrees of Aries. And then the new pope emerged shortly after that, and he gave his first speech starting around 7:22 p.m. on May 8th in Vatican City. And like a little funny thing a lot of the astrologers like commented on is just the chart has Scorpio rising. So the ruler of the ascendant, which is one of the most important planets in the chart, becomes Mars, which is in Leo in the 10th whole sign house. And it's he ended up like taking the name Pope Leo the 14th based on an earlier pope, but it's just funny that Leo is like the Latin word for lion, which is the name of the zodiac sign Leo the lion.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, it's pretty funny, pretty on the nose. All right, and what else happened with respect to that? The only other thing I think I wanted to mention was just listener Joe D. Sabatino noted that the United States progressed Jupiter is stationing direct right now. And it's kind of funny then that this is the first time in history that a pope was elected from the United States. And Jupiter, of course, is traditionally associated with like religious leaders and things like that. So there's something there that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's fascinating. When I read that, thank you to that listener for noting that. And also interesting, given that then that doubles up with Jupiter's upcoming ingress by transit to Cancer as well, which is where the natal Jupiter is in the Sibley chart.
Right, for sure, for sure. Okay, I think that's it. Yeah, so that it was just so, and then this was the completion of how the entire Mars-Pluto opposition and the Mars retrograde that it was coming off of really tied in with the broader sequence of, Pope Francis passing away. Well, Pope Francis getting sick actually first a few months ago around when Mars was stationing, as we discussed in the last episode. Then Pope Francis passing away and his funeral taking place like right on, I think, the day of the exact Mars Pluto opposition. And you had all those world leaders like flying out to the funeral from all over the world. And then you had a continuation of that with Pluto stationing in Aquarius early this month, and then we got the conclave, and then finally the election of Pope Leo the 14th. So it's an interesting and fascinating example of just how things can be kind of like a sequence sometimes.
Hmm, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, so that was that news story. Moving on, another major one towards the beginning of the month was the conflict between India and Pakistan was escalating and almost seemed like it was spiraling out of control for a period. This started around the time, again, this is like a continuation of something that started around the Mars-Pluto opposition when there was this like a terrorist attack that then sparked retaliation, and then things started spiraling out of control between India and Pakistan that started lobbing weapons back and forth against each other. And you had actually noticed something really fascinating because we actually have a chart for India, right?
Yeah, there's so few countries that have at least their modern version, have a exact time chart, like almost none. But it's one of them because there was a chart for, there was a time for when that would go in, when the partition would go into effect, which was for India, August 15th, 1947 at 12 a.m., right at midnight, in Delhi, India. And what was fascinating when I pulled up that chart for the first time, sometime in the last year, is when I noticed this before that happened, and then I revisited it again in the last month, is that it has a packed third house with the Saturn Pluto conjunction in Leo in the third. Also, the ascendant ruler is Mercury in Leo in the third, and so forth. There's a whole stellium there. But I was like,
Just
what? What a
describe it for the audio people.
Okay, so it's Gemini, very early Gemini rising, Mercury at about 6, 7 Leo in the third house, along with Pluto, Saturn, Venus, and the Sun, all in Leo. And why I thought that was so apt is because something really notable, I mean, something to note about India is like there's just, issues around like their neighbors because of this partition and how momentous but also destructive that was in the beginning of it, but then how they've still had some issues with regard to borders, Kashmir, etc. When India and Pakistan were divided into two. So, yeah, I thought that was fascinating. And then, of course, with the Mars
Yeah.
retrograde there.
So just that that's such a literal thing that you have that the third house is traditionally associated with neighbors, and that
Hmm.
it's like your neighbors if you're looking at a birth chart. But in this instance we're looking at the chart of a country, and they have this huge stellium in the third house of neighbors, and there's been this very long difficult relationship over the years with between India and Pakistan that are bordering or like neighboring countries. So it's
Hmm.
just very, very literal. And especially how it's like this is right on the Saturn Pluto conjunction of
Hmm.
1947, where Pluto's at 1313 Leo and Saturn is at 1335 Leo. So it's like, remember the last Saturn Pluto that we all got to experience conjunction was in 2020, and that was the primary thing we associate with the COVID pandemic. Here it's like you have a similarly kind of challenging aspect in the third house, and it just relates to the like fraught relationship between these two neighboring countries.
The other really interesting thing about this chart is that Mercury is the ascendant ruler. It's at like 6, almost 7 Leo, and that's exactly where Mars stationed retrograde at the beginning of this whole retrograde cycle.
Yeah. And then it makes sense then that once it's like so Mars station retrograde there in December, and like I don't know what was happening or if there was any buildup or precursor that started happening in December, but then it's like Mercury retrograded back into Cancer, and then basically as soon as it ingresses back into Leo and opposes Pluto by transit, that was when the initial like terrorist attack happened. And then it just set off this huge firestorm as Pluto was moving through or as Mars was moving through essentially the first half of Leo over the course of the early part of this month. And it was just hitting first that Mercury in Leo and then Pluto and Saturn and so on and so forth.
Right, which is also a good example of how sometimes the most pivotal events of a retrograde cycle are not necessarily near the stations, even though they often can be. But it's just like, especially with, a Mars station retrograde on an important point in the chart, like this one, it says there's going to be something important about this retrograde that's very Marsy that will happen at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. That's It's also a good example where I mentioned this in the third house episode, where it's just like sometimes you see significations associated with the houses that seem like minor or like why is neighbors like associated with the third house, or why is that important? Like
Mm.
under what circumstances would neighbors be something that should show up in your birth chart in a major way? But like sometimes it really is, and like you don't know that until either you come across a chart where the third house is really important in it and you see how somehow neighbors or a person's neighborhood is more significant in some notable way, but also when you have a major transit through your third house, and sometimes like those who live around you in your vicinity become more immediately important to you for some reason.
Absolutely, which is of course just really clear when you see the division of this land into India and Pakistan. Then of course your neighbors are immediately important because it was, half of one entity before. As an aside, if anyone has tracked with clarity the chart of Pakistan, I think it's supposed to be different than this one. I was having trouble becoming totally clear about that. But they celebrate their independence the day before, and there was something with like there being different time zones. So I'd love, like, please write me if you know anything about the Pakistan chart.
Yeah, this chart is just set for when India became independent officially from British rule at midnight on August 15th, 1947, with it set to Delhi, India, which is the capital,
Mm-hmm.
or was the capital at the time. And but you would, if you're setting it for Pakistan, obviously you would set it for their location using the other date.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, so that was a pretty notable one. And then there was a ceasefire is announced May 10th. But at first, like it wasn't clear if it was going to hold, but then it seems like things have settled down a little bit. So I don't know where that is all at this point, but hopefully that ceasefire piece continues to hold, and hopefully it'll be somewhat helpful once Mars departs from Leo and gets out of that third house stellium in June.
My
Yeah, yeah.
love, how are you,
Presumably it
baby?
will be helpful.
Thank you, baby, for being here. How are you?
All right,
How are
so
you,
that was
precious?
that news story. Moving on, another major news story that came out this month that I saw in the headlines was on May 18th. It was announced that former President Joe Biden was diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer that had already spread to the bone, which in some instances can mean that it's already terminal, which is, it may not mean that, but it may. It's kind of like up in the air. He was reportedly, his diagnosis happened only 2 days earlier on May 16th. So, one of the things that was interesting about this is that it fell right on there was this difficult set of like two aspects that happened at the same time that I mentioned in the last forecast, which was the Sun Uranus cazimi in Taurus at 27 degrees of Taurus, a Sun Uranus conjunction, which fell in Biden's sixth house of illness. But also on the same day, transiting Mercury came up and squared Mars at the same exact time. And in the last forecast, I called this, quote, one of my least favorite aspects of the month, just because it looked like a tough configuration. And he ended up making that announcement on that day.
Mm-hmm.
So let me put the chart up just for like educational purposes here. Okay, so here's Biden's chart. He has Sagittarius rising. The Sun Venus cazimi was at 27 degrees of Taurus.
Sun Uranus.
Sun Uranus, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Let me, I'll put a bi wheel up so that people can see that. Okay, there it is. So Biden on the inside, transits on the outside. We see the Sun Uranus conjunction there at 27 Taurus. And this is important for him personally because it's opposing his Sun at 27 degrees of Scorpio in the 12th house, as well as his Venus in Scorpio at 28 degrees in the 12th house. But the primary thing that I thought of when I first heard about this was it suddenly made sense of the Mars retrograde, which we'd been paying attention to him since last September, because I had started talking about it actually last summer, earlier in the summer, because I was concerned about how the Mars retrograde was going to move into Cancer, and then it was going to conjoin his Jupiter in the eighth house of death and mortality, and it was going to conjoin in retrograde over his Jupiter, which is the ruler of his ascendant, which is one of the most crucial places for vitality, especially physical vitality in the chart. And what was interesting now in retrospect is that I thought like the first pass of Mars over his Jupiter happened like last September. And I had thought that one of the scenarios was that he steps down during that time due to health or illness, and then Harris like steps up and temporarily at least becomes president for the rest of the campaign. And that was like a serious scenario I was looking at, especially in connection with the eclipses that were occurring at that time, like especially the Pisces eclipse that was happening in his fourth house of endings and her 10th house of career. So in retrospect, it's interesting because what this means and what ended up happening then is like this aggressive form of cancer must have been forming and spreading and getting more serious in the background over the past several months, since at least last September when Mars went into his eighth house. And assuming the timeline, that the timeline of everything is correct that's been reported, presumably he started feeling some symptoms of that, or started having some indication of that in his life. But then it was only later on, towards the tail end of the Mars retrograde, as it's like coming out of its shadow period, that the diagnosis like actually became clear. And I just thought that was a important and interesting example for us to think about as astrologers from a purely technical standpoint, just because of the way the take-home lesson is that sometimes there's like, when you see an important transit forming in the background, it can indicate that something is building up or developing that you're not fully aware of yet. But sometimes towards the very tail end of the transit, the outcome or the effect of it becomes known or makes itself known, was part of my like take home lesson for that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really noticed, of course, too, the Sun Uranus conjunction in the sixth that really jumped out, obviously, with regard to like a sudden out of the blue thing with regard to health. There were a couple other interesting timing things, too, besides that and the Mars retro. If you put up his chart again, he's in a Venus year. He's in an 11th house year right now at age 82. And so Venus, his 11th house is Libra, so Venus is ruling the 11th. It's not so much important that it's the 11th, it's that principle that sometimes if you're in an annual profection year, that where the perfected planet, the ruler, rules two houses, it will also simultaneously activate more than usual the other house that planet rules, in which case here it's the sixth house. And he got the diagnosis one day after Venus hit the previous retrostation degree, which I was noticing because stuff was going on in my own life with regard to Venus hitting that station degree. And I was like, oh, it's really activating something about that whole retrograde cycle. And that was the same thing for him, which was activating not just his 11th house, but also his sixth house of ill health. And then so that was notable to me. And then he also, the full moon in Scorpio happened just a handful of days before that. And speaking of things brewing in the background, just like the Mars retrograde cycle, this was like a full moon illuminating his Scorpio stellium natally in the 12th house. And the 12th house can be things that are, happening behind the scenes that you're not aware of yet. And also, ill health can be part of that one.
Right, for sure. Yeah. So, that was a notable story with, the former president who just became not president in like February, and now possible terminal diagnosis. We'll see how it goes and see what happens. All right. So moving on, the next major thing that I noticed ties in with, again, both transits that we previously discussed, but also ones that are upcoming and how we had anticipated they would manifest. But I started seeing in the news like all these reports of like major news stories like CBS and stuff were running stories about robo taxis, and I was wondering why. And it turned out the reason was that apparently Tesla is preparing to launch its robo taxi service in Austin for the first time, possibly on June 12th. And the stories were focused on that, but also how Google's competing service, which is called Waymo, is already in at least four cities, which is like Phoenix, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Austin. So this means that it's going to put Google and Tesla like head to head in directly competing for each other in their first city starting in Austin, but it's also a preview of a larger competition that's about to ramp up very, very quickly of automated cars driving around cities first as taxi services, but then eventually, obviously, more broadly with people having cars that are self-driving cars just in general, which is also starting to happen. And this is, in the short term, I think partially this is the tail end of Jupiter and Gemini, as Jupiter is having its last weeks in that sign. Sometimes the final results of that become clear in the later part of the transit, which is a recurring theme that we're going to see over and over again as we talk about transits this month, that sometimes it's at the end of like a retrograde or a transit that you fully see what it did during its time in that sign. But also it's paving the way, of course, for Uranus moving into Gemini, which is going to start in July, and just the
Mhm.
complete transformation of the local travel, the way that people get around cities locally, essentially becoming like moving to self-driving cars. And eventually, probably by the end of that transit, that 7 year long transit that ends in the early 2030s, becoming just ubiquitous by that time. Like we're seeing the early stages of that.
Yeah, when you were telling me about that, I was like, "Oh, I'm not ready." I'm the opposite of an early adopter when it comes to technology. I'm very
Right.
much a late adopter. But
I think I had to drag you onto like MySpace or no, on Facebook.
so
Facebook was
any
the
social media, you were
yeah.
like, it was after the first conference I went to, and you were like, "So are you on social media? Got to keep in touch with people." And I was like, "Hell no." Famous
Yeah.
last words, but similar with smartphones. Anyway, I'm more or less up to speed, but yeah, I'm not an early adopter. So it is interesting with Jupiter kind of handing off the Gemini transit to Uranus. And also, once Uranus ingresses into Gemini, which is going to be a week into July, which is very soon, 5 weeks from now, it's immediately trining Pluto and Aquarius, which means actually that trine is already applying right now, you know.
Mm.
And that's what that sounds like to me. That's like that upcoming Uranus Pluto trine that becomes more exact, and both of them being in the same, air signs. But Uranus is not there yet, but it's like it's sneaking up, actually, even though it's still in late Taurus.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, it's, Uranus is at 27. It's actually clicking over into 28 today. So it's coming in fast. And then this summer we will get that trine. And yeah, I just wanted to like signal that because it's going to be such a profound transformation that we've had a century, over a century now, since the rise of automobiles and of people initially like learning how to drive around cities, and then cities eventually becoming completely changed in order to adjust to cars, and even like the layout of like moving from densely populated urban like city planning type situations to eventually like in the US the rise of suburbs and things like that that are super spread out, and that you literally like have to have a car in order to get around, and where public transportation isn't even that great because everything's built so far away or so far apart, and how much that transformed the world, but also, American society over the past century. Like we're looking at a similar shift that's about to take place in our lifetime in a very short, like very soon, basically in the next 7 to 10 years of watching us go from where the predominant form of getting around is people driving their cars around the city to taxis and cars being driven by artificial intelligence and by robots, essentially. And one of the early things that people are going to see that's going to be startling in a like Uranian way to go along with this is that I was reading that when Waymo, which is Google's robo-taxi service, when it moves into a new city, they try to acclimate people by having their cars drive around the city without anybody in them at first. So you just see like a car driving around the city that's completely empty on its own. And so get ready to see like a bunch of ghost cars driving around cities over the next few years. And that's going to be part of our entry into Uranus and Gemini.
Yeah, that's so weird. Uranus and Gemini, Trine, Pluto, and Aquarius. Something about like Saturn ruling Aquarius and it being like this impersonal thing where there's like not people involved. I don't know.
I actually didn't think about that, but Saturn will catch up with, will go into Gemini in the 2030s, around the time that Uranus is finishing up. So
Mm.
maybe there's some sort of theme then that happens where there's the rapid disruptive change that Uranus and Gemini brings to the transportation industry. But then Saturn comes in somewhere at the tail end of that and like pumps the brakes and maybe tries to put in some rules or regulations if certain things get out of hand or something like that.
For sure. Yeah, that's possible.
Yeah. All right. So that's what I wanted to mention about that. And then moving on, the last major news story that I saw that happened this month happened on May 20th when Google, at one of its big events, did a big launch of VO3, which is the third iteration of their AI video generator, where they released this new AI video generator that creates short clips that are not just lifelike video of people, but they also include AI generated sound. So all of a sudden, the major innovation is sound, where it's not just putting out these lifelike clips that we've been kind of seeing gradually over the past couple of years, getting better and better and better. But now all of a sudden, they are clips with sound, which completes the immersion basically, because some of them, it's actually really hard to tell the difference between what's AI generated and what's not. And after this came out on May 20th, one of the things I noticed when Google announced this on May 20th, Saturn clicked over for the first time to be within 2 degrees of conjoining Neptune. So that Saturn Neptune conjunction is just ramping up like super quickly. And we had always talked about that symbolically as being a period where it's difficult to tell the difference between what's real and what's not. And one of the most stunning area where that's
Yo, Bowser Big
happening
Bean
is in
Burrito, what's
AI
up? What's up,
generated
Christian? How are you?
video.
How are
And
you?
now that they've
Sorry, I missed your
perfected
messages.
it, not just being
2:44. That
visually
was 3 minutes ago.
lifelike, but
Yo, what's up, Christian?
also
How are you, brother?
sounding lifelike,
What's up, Bowser?
as
Here
if
we
you
go.
have actual
Oh, thanks,
actors like
Bowser.
acting out
Thank you,
these
man.
video clips.
I'm good. How are you?
Now, it's almost been perfected where
I
it's really hard to tell the
removed
difference between
everyone
what's real and
as
what's
so
not.
there's
And
no
there was this
mods.
explosion of people making like
So
thousands of
if
these
you lost your mod
AI
badge,
generated
don't take it
clips like all
personally.
over social
Everyone lost
media
their
over
mod
the
badge.
past
So
week or so since this happened, and it's
I'm the
been really
only mod
wild
now just
to
for
to
improved
watch. So some
stream
of them are
security.
like you'll see a clip that looks like a real podcast host, like people sitting here like we are talking into a microphone, but they're giving like terrible advice of like life advice or health advice. There was another series that I was seeing of this theme of like quote unquote prompt theory, where there were lifelike videos of people saying that they don't believe that their world is created from prompts. And then people like arguing about that or having reflections about that in this series that having like a philosophical crisis about it.
If I'm a prompt, does that mean that I don't have free will?
Well, yeah.
So, does that mean that we don't have free will?
Well, that is the big question, isn't it?
which then led to other funny comments of like one person reflecting about the Bible and saying like that how it says like in the beginning was the Word, and
Right.
saying that the word it was like prompts.
Right. And the word was made flesh.
That's true. So the other spin-off that it had that I noticed was because they were so real and lifelike, it led to some people posting, like recording a clip and posting a real video where they're interacting with somebody saying that it was AI generated, when in fact it was a real video of them filming something. But it's gotten so, the AI's gotten so good that you actually, people are struggling to tell the difference when somebody posts like a real video versus a fake video. So we had always expected this to ramp up and become much more pressing by like at least by like 2024, and we were expecting it to be more prominent. I feel like that it ended up being in the presidential election because we saw Saturn and Neptune getting within like 10 degrees or something around that time. But now that it's gotten closer and it'll get within 1 degree this year, it's clear that this technology is being perfected, and there's going to be a real struggle to tell like what's real versus what's not over the next few years, especially as this conjunction is going exact this summer when it gets very close, but especially early next year when the conjunction goes exact for the first time is going to be the final point when I think the technology is fully perfected. I would assume.
Yeah, I so much hate this manifestation of the Saturn Neptune. It's terrible. I mean, yes, it's interesting technologically, and it's interesting with the images, which is the Neptune part, but so much potential for abuse. And, you know, yes, deep fakes, that kind of thing. I am surprised more that hasn't happened yet, but yeah, with this new iteration, they probably will start to be more, pretty rapidly, I would guess. And I'd be surprised if there weren't.
Right.
And how are they going to contain that? And I was thinking about how, Saturn is like regulation, right? And Neptune is this like slippery, elusive thing that evades being contained by Saturn. And, you were mentioning, of course, that because I was talking about before this, when we were chatting about this, about how, the difficulty with regulating this, or that the technology has gotten ahead of the regulation. And you were noting that there was actually some Biden era regulation around this that had gotten rolled back. And so, it's that Saturn Neptune. And I was thinking as well about like it reminds me of this phrase, like that you can't put the genie back in the bottle, like after it's out. Which, upon further reflection, I was like, that's very Saturn
Sorry
Neptune.
guys, sorry
Like
I missed
Saturn
your
is like the
messages.
container,
Thanks for being
and
here, Sandoval.
Neptune is
Thanks
like
for
this
being here,
ethereal
Valerie,
thing that, like,
Burrito.
once it's out, like it can't be
Legends.
put into
Appreciate
form,
you.
or put back in the structure, or the boundaries. So, anyway, yeah, that's my current catchphrase for this phenomenon.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm purely astrologer good. Like I'm just impressed how the astrology is lining up, and I'll continue to be impressed, even though will have some terrible ramifications on different things. But as just a moment of watching a major outer planet alignment coming into alignment, and us having anticipated archetypally like what we knew from like previous times, like for example 2017 was the Saturn Neptune square, so that was the last hard aspect between Saturn and Neptune. And during that time the notion of fake news was all over the headlines at that point, and it was something that initially people were like struggling to deal with, and then eventually people got better, a little bit better at spotting fake news and things like that. But we're at a similar point here where we sort of anticipated this, but now we're seeing it happen so literally and so vividly that I can't help but be just fascinated at how the astrology is working out.
Yeah, for sure. The Saturn Neptune is just really striking to me, and already, it's been co-present for so long, right? The past bunch of years, and so it's like crossing two different signs, and that's part of why, it's such a long transit here, a long aspect. But just the fracturing into different realities about certain topics is just like really striking to me, where you just completely inhabit different what you think are realities about something, and there's like very little leeway to convince each other. But on the video type thing, I just saw I wasn't even searching for this, so I just saw someone last night on social media say that on TikTok, someone else had been reporting the original person who's posting her voice as like a copy. And so her videos were being taken down and she couldn't prove that it was like her own voice. And that just really struck me as like the Saturn Neptune as well.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's going to be all sorts of weird things that we've never dealt with before that will like arise out of this. But and then this is going to be the most intense phase of that over the next year or two, especially. But hopefully, in the long term, eventually it'll become something that we adjust to and get used to, and like learn how to deal with a little bit more and develop tools for dealing with. But it's going to be intense. This being our first true experience of this as humanity. Although, we've gone through some versions of it before with Saturn, Neptune, and sometimes blurring the lines between what's real and what's not, and adjusting to that at different points. You mentioned the length of the transit. I think that's a good point also because it's a really tangible example that we can take away from as astrologers, where Saturn first moved into Pisces in early 2023. So that was only 2 years ago now, but that was the beginning of the co-presence between Saturn and Neptune and the build-up to the conjunction. And then it's just gotten more and more intense, we've seen, as it gets closer to the actual exact conjunction. But and sometimes it can be an unexpected challenge or even a violent sort of act that takes place that comes out of left field unexpectedly. Then the other aspect, which weirdly goes exact the same day, is a Jupiter-Saturn square, also on June 15th, which feels to me like a contraction or a struggle between moving forward versus being held backwards, and perhaps the being held back forces having the upper hand. And then finally, my last challenging aspect I'm not super stoked about this month is the Mercury-Pluto opposition, which happens on June 29th. So those are some of the highlights for this month that I've been thinking about.
I would agree with all of those, and I think this is a good little section to continue. It's doing that good summary of like what the month looks like, what the highlights are, and the lowlights. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's start by
Do you want
let's
to do
start with
chronological or?
yeah. I mean, I guess because I want to talk about the Mars and the Venus retrogrades and coming off of that, but I guess let's start with Venus because Venus is the one that completes first. So here, for those watching the video version, is the classic Venus retrograde graphic that Madeline DeCoates from honeycomb.co made for me that's really helped out in terms of showing the different phases of Venus now that we're almost to the end of it, where it first moved into Pisces on January 2nd, and that was the start of what I'm defining as, because I have an expanded definition of Venus retrograde, which is that Venus retrograde is not only when Venus is actually moving backwards, and it's not only the specific degrees in which it's moving backwards, but the Venus retrograde is also experienced as an extended transit of Venus through one, or in this instance, two signs of the zodiac that lasts for, in this instance, like 6 months. So we've had 6 months of Venus just hanging out in the same two signs of the zodiac, and thus the same two houses of our chart getting activated by this extended Venus transit. And on June 5th, that finally comes to an end when Venus moves out of Aries and moves into Taurus and begins treading new ground, which will coincide with new experiences and a new area of focus in our life as Venus moves into a new whole sign house in our chart. But also, it's a good time for some final reflections in the first 4 days of the month while Venus is heading out of Aries. And sometimes at the very tail end of the transit, you see the final manifestation of something that was in progress over the past few months during the Venus retrograde itself. During the very tail end of Venus being direct and heading out of the retrograde sign, sometimes the final manifestation of that transit becomes clear or is finished being put together sort of in the shop or in the lab and is ready for like prime time to like go out into the public. Like for example, I was watching a lot of stuff about like Star Wars recently and how Star Wars originally came out at the tail end of the Venus retrograde, just like this, and then was a huge success. But during the retrograde itself, back in 1977, they were putting it together, and the studio thought it was going to bomb, and they almost like cut the plug on it or didn't promote it and all this other stuff. But in the end, through trying really hard, he got lucky. Like George Lucas got lucky. The movie got released. He pulled it together at the last minute, and it was a huge, huge success. But there was like a process to get there in the months leading up to that during the Venus retrograde, and it wasn't until the end of Venus almost leaving that final sign of retrograde that the results became clear.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I mean, sometimes it really is hitting that shadow degree of the previous retrograde station where you really notice what's going on with the retrograde when it comes back and passes that degree while it's direct. But it's still going through the same sign, and if you are using whole sign houses, that means it's still the same topic being activated. So, they're still dwelling on that topic. In some instances, once it's out of that sign, you're moving on to new things. While in other cases, the retrograde may have sparked an important event that you will still have to deal with after that. It could go different ways depending on the activations in your own chart. But the thing that I'm most excited about is Venus going into Taurus, where it's having really nice dignity for the first time in quite a while. You could say that Venus was exalted in Pisces, which it is, but it kept going back and forth next to Saturn, during its retrograde cycle. And one of the stations was like exactly conjunct Saturn, which certainly tempers the exaltation experience. So I'm excited that, we had that whole long extended period with Venus with Saturn, and then we had Venus in Aries, which is, opposite the sign of its rulership. And then we're finally going into Venus being in its own sign, and not just being in its own sign, but being in an Earth sign where Venus is so much more grounded here. I think you cannot say that Venus in Pisces or with Saturn or Venus in Aries are especially known for their groundedness, but Venus in Taurus very much is. And I'm just someone who enjoys experiences of groundedness. I'm really looking forward to that change, moving into an Earth sign. It's much more embodied. It's much more grounded in like real life experience, the here and now, your present moment. It's also really good at relational things, but coming from a grounded place. Whereas like we've had all this Gemini transits, which we still will for the first half of the month at least. And that's relational too, but in a totally different way, in your headspace, quickly talking, exchanging info kind of way. Venus in Taurus is very relational, but coming from a very grounded space in yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, that transition I think is going to be really palpable because the other thing is we're moving from Venus being in the sign of its detriment for months to being in its home sign. And part of the difference that we're going to see is I got a real sense with Venus going through Aries how, in my book, I talked about the original translation of the term for detriment, and the two that came up were either adversity or exile, and both would have worked as a translation. And in my book, I actually tended towards adversity, but I think exile is actually up there and is now my favorite translation for detriment, because with Venus or any other planet being in that sign, it's as far away from one of its home signs as you can possibly get. In that instance, it's like the sign opposite to Libra, and it's such a foreign place for Venus to be that initially when it's in that sign, it struggles with it struggles to function to some extent because it's being given like tools that are opposite or contrary to its basic nature, which is like Venus is in Aries is being like given tools of war, for example, when it's a planet typically of like peace. So Venus has been kind of like out in the wilderness a lot of this retrograde in Aries, and once it moves into its home sign of Taurus, we're going to be reacquainted with what it looks like when Venus is given a greater sense of self-autonomy to do what comes natural to it. And part of what comes natural to it is that function of like unifying and reconciling things. And it doesn't, and what's cool is it's not just going to be doing that on its own, but this month, shortly after Venus moves into Taurus, Jupiter moves into Cancer, the sign of its exaltation, which is one of the signs that it functions in at a very high level. So we get the gods or something like
Okay.
that. And yeah, I'll have to have a
Yeah.
further, fuller discussion about that at some point. All right, so back to aspects. We talked about Venus entering on Taurus on June 6th, Mercury, Jupiter conjunction on June 8th, Jupiter entering the sign of its exaltation on June 9th. Also on June 11th, I just wanted to mention this because it's probably my second favorite aspect of the month, which is this nice little Mercury Venus sextile. That is not the right chart. That is
I really like the Mercury Venus sextile too. It's one of if I had to, people sometimes
You're
they're like,
watching
if
like
you
a
had to trade
hawk. I
out
was
something in
wa-
your chart, or if you wish there was one thing in your chart that you don't have,
It
and that
is,
would be
sweetie.
mine, like
Yeah,
a
we ran out of smoothie.
Mercury Venus aspect.
It's time to put in the
Because
work now.
it's so good about
Amazing, baby.
putting things into words in a aesthetically pleasing way, but also in a relationally oriented to the person you're communicating with way. Like, it's just really good with words, and I wish I had that one. So this will be a nice little transiting aspect.
absolutely. I always think of T.S. Eliot, who is my example of like a Venus Mercury conjunction on the degree of the ascendant in Libra. He's like a famous poet. But this Mercury Venus sextile happens from like 5 degrees of Cancer to 5 degrees of Taurus on June 11th. And this also happens to be the day of our first lunation of the month, which is a full moon in the sign of Sagittarius. So let me actually animate the chart to be exactly at that full moon. It's a little timing wise, the moon goes exact very early in the day on the 11th here in the US and like US time zones. It goes exact at 20 degrees of Sagittarius. And one of the things that's cool about this lunation is that it's happening in Sagittarius in a Jupiter ruled sign. And it's only like 2 days after Jupiter has moved into Cancer. So for some reason, this first full moon that's taking place in the month on the 11th is re-emphasizing that Jupiter in Cancer ingress and transit that's just taken place, which is just going to further highlight it and put greater emphasis on it. But it's also great that it's happening the same day as the Mercury Venus sextile, because then that's really going to highlight, or it's going to stamp that Mercury Venus sextile onto this lunation, which could give it greater longevity of like a couple of weeks than it might have otherwise.
That's such an interesting full moon because, on the one hand, I do really like that Jupiter has already ingressed into Cancer and it's ruling the full moon, and the Mercury Venus is lovely. It's also 2 days right after the moon goes through late Scorpio and sets off potentially the Mars Uranus square. And so I'm curious about that interplay. There's some really nice things going on, and then there's some little jangly things potentially as well.
Yeah, well, it's also just a few days before the Mars Uranus square itself comes into
Right.
alignment. It goes exact on the 15th. So that
Exactly.
is hard because it's already functionally like operative at the full moon, which is that Mars is at 26 Leo and Uranus is at 28 Leo. So it's like we get these two competing energies of a very optimistic, smooth talking, and poetic Mercury Venus sextile that's happening the day of the full moon. But then we also have this much more tense, combative, disruptive, and even potentially violent energy of Mars Uranus coming into alignment right after that full moon, just a few days later.
It's a very interesting mixed picture. Yeah.
Yeah, and if that wasn't enough, it's like look at Saturn and Neptune. Saturn has now clicked over, so it's within a degree of Neptune for the first time, where Saturn's at 1 degree and 4 minutes of Aries, and Neptune's at 2 degrees and 1 minute of Aries. So they've finally come within 1 degree, which means we're at the most intense phase of the Saturn Neptune conjunction at this point that we've never experienced before. And the full impact of that is really being felt at this point.
By the end of the month, they're so close to the stations. Like, I think Neptune station's first, maybe 4 days into July, and then Saturn's 12 days into July, and they're 13 minutes apart when they station. So this will be a really interesting, when they're both stationary. So this will be an interesting test of like, is that exact enough? Versus like exact to the minute. I think it'll feel pretty exact. So by the end of the
Yeah.
month, since we're talking about June and not July, but by the end of the month, they're basically there.
wachibotele champomu wachibotele champomu wachilungu chadamutwa wachibotele champomu mpasu wachibotele champomu wachilungu chadamutwa wachilungu chabyamutabalunda banye ngani wangambila kasayi nganena kweto kasayi wabalengela kasayi nganena nyanyi wangambile nyananyi mwini bulunda tubanga kukichimanga cha mulamba kwakalamba mangola ni ngongo chirimba wakwa ngongo ni kasanzu wakwa mbwanyi mchila kasanga ni lunto akumayi kasayi nganena nyananyi mwini bulunda katwikari nashini basa kundemba mutombo kuva bana basheta mayenga ita bakweta kuni chimbulu haminyela mema kumona chikapo masamba mwa mucho kwa ndandanda mema kumona mumpenda mbuyi turi ni mushelela kuntweko turi ni mukubo wambelenga kwinaki kwetu kumweka kasayi nganena balunda.
What a trip. That was cool.
Welcome to the Jimmy Dore Show, everybody. Keaton and Kurt here in for Jimmy while he is on the road this week. All right, this was a fast developing story, everyone. A very fast developing story. I don't even remember which show I did this on, if it was Jimmy's or mine, but Elon Musk expressed his dissatisfaction with the big, beautiful bill just a couple days ago, saying a bill cannot be both big and beautiful. That is a contradiction in terms.
Doge is fake.
So, I was like disappointed to see the massive spending bill, frankly, which increases the budget deficit, not just decrease it, and undermines the work that the Doge team is doing.
I actually thought that when this big, beautiful bill came along. I mean, like, everything he's done on Doge gets wiped out in the first year.
I think a bill can be big or it can be beautiful, but I don't know if it can be both.
He's such a nerd. Kyle does.
Welcome to the Jimmy Dore Show, everybody. Keaton and Kurt here in for Jimmy while he is on the road this week. All right, this was a fast developing story, everyone. A very fast developing story. I don't even remember which show I did this on, if it was Jimmy's or mine, but Elon Musk expressed his dissatisfaction with the big, beautiful bill just a couple days ago, saying a bill cannot be both big and beautiful. That is a contradiction in terms.
Doge is fake.
So, I was like disappointed to see the massive spending bill, frankly, which increases the budget deficit, not just decrease it, and undermines the work that the Doge team is doing.
I actually thought that when this big, beautiful bill came along. I mean, like, everything he's done on Doge gets wiped out in the first year.
I think a bill can be big or it can be beautiful, but I don't know if it can be both.
He's such a nerd. Kyle does him very funny too.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Cool.
He's tough to nail. You know, that Dutch accent is kind of hard. You know.
It's not quite that, but it's very, dude. You could tell that he was disappointed, you know, because he's, again, don't forget, a hardcore Asperger guy.
Oh yeah.
And so you can see he is disappointed because as soon as this happened, and we reported a while ago about it, I'm sure you guys did too, about how Doge wasn't cutting anything. Bannon came on the show and told us, you don't go to the Pentagon, it's worthless.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So people are crashing their fat scooters into trucks and all this for nothing.
Right.
But I think he didn't know, because as soon as he realized the big, beautiful bill, all of a sudden I started seeing a lot more. We got to go to Mars. Like,
Right.
I think he got so disillusioned that he's like, oh, no, let's just go to Mars. He's got an Occupy Mars shirt.
Yep. Oh no, it's very much get me the hell out of here kind of thing. And that is what he's doing. So the Trump War Room posts, Elon Musk, I look forward to continuing to be a friend, an advisor of the president, continuing to support the Doge team. And we are relentlessly pursuing $1 trillion in waste and fraud reductions, which will benefit the American taxpayer. But of course, he is out at
I will
the
continue to
government.
visit. I will continue to visit the White House. Oh, will you bring your
Continue
son?
to drink from the minibar. I will continue.
Bring your son with the robot name.
Yeah. I'll continue to sleep in the guest house at Mar-a-Lago. Yes, because that is what I am owed. But I will not have an official position here any longer. Here's Elon Musk bidding a bittersweet farewell.
So I look forward to continuing to be a friend and advisor to the president, continuing to support the Doge team, and we are relentlessly pursuing $8 trillion in waste and fraud reductions, which will benefit the American taxpayer. That's it, really. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Great job. Thank you. Thank you. There's a cart for your bags if you need it outside the kitchen.
Nick will show you out.
Yeah, show you out. Yes. A disillusioned Musk, distance from Trump, says he is exiting Washington. I wish we had
you
some
and me
violence
both,
for
buddy.
this. Yeah, exactly. Elon Musk took a swipe at President Trump's signature domestic policy legislation, saying it would add to the national deficit. Well, it's not signature anything yet because it hasn't passed. I mean, it still has to get through the Senate, which is going to be hard. He complained to administration officials about a lucrative deal that went to a rival company to build an artificial intelligence data center in the Middle East. God damn it. Spurned. And he has yet to make good on a $100 million pledge to Trump's political operation. So
Want to hear something else?
Has not gone
I
yet,
know, because my friend, I do a show called News for Women. I produce with Chloe.
Right.
Chloe Branch. She has a buddy who's from Abu Dhabi, who's an arms dealer, and they poach Elon's talent. And guess what country doesn't have no tariffs on nothing? Abu Dhabi. So he's getting his stuff poached. That has to be through Trump's people setting that up. He's probably upset in many ways.
Yes, he seems pretty upset. He seems pretty bitter. Mr. Musk, who once called himself the president's first buddy, oh, that's sweet, is now operating. He's my best friend. You were my best friend. Is now operating with some distance from Mr. Trump, as he says he is ending his government work to spend more time on his companies. Mr. Musk remains on good terms with Mr. Trump, according to White House officials. But he has also made it clear that he is disillusioned with Washington and frustrated with the obstacles he encountered as he upended the federal bureaucracy, raising questions about the strength of the alliance between the president and the world's richest man.
Do people think he's the world's richest man? I just want to ask, is everybody this fucking dumb that they really believe the richest man is Elon Musk? Do you think you would get to know the name of the richest man?
Well, he's the
It's in
world's
Forbes,
richest
so what?
mammalian man. The world's
No, he's
richest
not. No, he's not the richest man. Not
warm-blooded
by a
man.
long shot.
I'm
Not
talking
by a
about-
long shot.
So you think you don't think the people richer than him are like the reptiles, like the shape-shifting lizards? You think there are
I think
warm-blooded
MBS.
vertebrate mammals who are richer than him? Is that what you're saying?
Dude, there's you ever hear of the von Merkensteins?
No.
Yeah. That I promise they're richer.
All right, I'll take. Well, maybe Trump should hire him next. Von Merkenstein should come. He
He's
should
a
take
front
over
man.
Doge.
Look, he's a disillusioned. I see this with everyone. It's like once I hit my 40s in comedy, the same disillusionment of the business, I watch all these other people go through it. And he's a guy who's a little bit spurgy, to say the least. And he really was like excited that we found a lot of waste. And he's just some dumb nerd. The whole media made it out like he's the power behind every stupid liberal, especially in New York. Oh, Elon controls Trump. Did you really? Do people think that nerd was in charge? No, he's yet another nerd that is being taken advantage of while he's there. Didn't you watch Barbenheimer? This is how it works.
Well, the thing about Elon is because he donated so much money, you notice Trump doesn't go after him the way he goes after the other people when he pushes back. Right? He remains very diplomatic. Trump was
Jack Ma.
Yeah, exactly. Mr. Musk was the biggest known political spender in the 2024 election, and he told Mr. Trump's advisors this year that he would give $100 million to groups controlled by the president's team before the 2026 midterms. As of this week, the money hasn't come in yet, according to multiple people familiar with the matter, who spoke on the condition of anonymity to describe the behind-the-scenes dynamic. The billionaire's imprint is still firmly felt in official Washington through that effort, an initiative to drastically cut spending that has deployed staff across the government. But Mr. Musk has said in recent days that he spent too much time focused on politics and has lamented the reputational damage he and his companies have suffered because of his work in the Trump administration. Well, I say he earned it. I think I probably did spend a bit too much time on politics, Mr. Musk said in an interview this week with Ars Technica, a tech news outlet. He added, it was just relative time allocation that probably was a little too high on the government side, and I've reduced that significantly in recent weeks. I've tweaked the dials in my back. In February, Mr. Musk leaped on stage at the conservative, this just seemed like just yesterday, at CPAC with a chainsaw and remarked how easy it was to save billions of dollars, sometimes in an hour. Yeah, like it's wild, he said. Mr. Musk's Doge team has repeatedly inflated its cost-saving efforts, at times posting erroneous claims about ending federal contracts that they later deleted. Oh, yeah, no, that was definitely move fast, break things. Most of what they said they were doing was absolute bullshit. Yeah.
Right, but like it's just like Kash Patel and all these people think they're going to do what not Bangino. I think he was rotten from the start, but maybe Kash Patel. But they all are like the young, knock down the house, AOC. Remember that documentary on Netflix?
Right, yeah.
And then all of a sudden, Jimmy saying force the vote. AOC's slogan.
Right.
Now Jimmy's violent for saying the slogan she came up with.
Right.
How long is everyone going to fall for this stuff? And what I'm amazed at, especially now that I don't know if you know, but Joe Rogan's Club is the seat of Western power now.
Build a deportation machine without assembling a police state. That costs money. Even whatever, philosophical differences aside, that requires a major investment. Investment. That far transcends, if you look at a distribution of resources, that far surpasses what you're going to save by firing the blue-haired lady at USAID.
Yeah,
it was always
like
going to end up this way.
It sounds a lot to me like venture capital, like America's a shell company. Okay,
Right.
So the real country of these people, whatever this 1% is, put their investment in, and they're getting their investment back. If the doors fall off the plane, F you. If anything goes wrong, this is a shell company. It's not a real country.
Right.
Okay,
Exactly.
that's all. It's real simple. If you look at it that way, you could tell, you can see what it is. It doesn't add up the numbers. You're right.
Exactly.
So why would they be? It's not a mistake.
No.
They're like, oh, it's just greed. Yeah, no, it is. But also, they know what they're doing. That's why they're getting rich from it. So
Of course.
the people invested, they're getting their investment back, and they're pulling out this loser of a company.
Right. It's impossible. What the vision of Doge was impossible to implement on these terms. So he finishes. So if 80% is what we're talking about, if 80% of the government is essentially out of bounds for Doge right from the get-go, it's largely pointless initiative from the standpoint of broad government efficiency. Exactly.
Mars has less
Exactly.
gravity, so it'll probably work better there. It's just there's too much gravity here.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. But that's it. And they're not even talking about leaving that 80% alone. It's not only that it's out of bounds. It's they want to increase resources for that. They want to build more immigration jails. They want to increase the Pentagon budget. Right? So it's not just that that's out of bounds. It's no, they want to add to that. That
Bernie
means
Madoff could not stop. He had to
You're
keep
out
it
of
going
room.
until he was caught. He could never stop it. He could never disclose it. He could
Right.
never stop it. He had to keep it going. No choice. That's where we're at. They have to keep the scam going. It's just that simple, dude. They're going to run it, and hopefully a war starts. Why are they trying for war so hard? Because what gets us out of this when they do this?
Right.
You know, $2 trillion's missing from the where we can't account for it. Oh no, 9/11. Well, we
Yep,
got to move.
exactly.
So
Exactly.
here, it's like a fire in California. It's all the same thing. You burn it down for the insurance.
Yep, exactly. It's like the sporting goods store that got busted out by Tony and and Paulie there. Right?
Our system of government is Greek lightning.
Yeah. What was the name of that store in the show? I forget. But anyway, they did scam people, all right. Look at the impressions on this one. Remember when this was very exciting news? The Pentagon just failed its 7th audit in a row, and Elon quote tweets it. Sounds like a job for Doge. 45.9 million views, 243,000 likes. There was an
They didn't
appetite
fail
for
an
that.
audit. They don't have one. They're not allowed to give them one. This is a little inaccuracy there. We don't know if they could pass an audit. They will not have one.
Right.
It's so much worse than they failed it.
Oh yeah.
They failed to have one.
Trump, February 19th, 2025, says Glenn Greenwald, we're cutting the Pentagon budget by 8%. Trump yesterday during his White House meeting with Netanyahu, we're so excited, we're increasing military spending by $150 billion to create the first ever $1 trillion annual Pentagon budget. That's right. That was from Netanyahu's visit.
Play Village people while we dance to this great news.
In April. Yes. Michael Tracy's always got the deadpan sarcasm. Elon's tweet here from 2 months ago. I know Defense Department procurement better than I know any part of the government before Doge. Major reform is needed, and it will happen. Narrator, it didn't happen. Nicely done. And I love this one, too. One thing's for sure, we are all indebted to Elon Musk for making good on his pledge to smash the deep state by going hard at the National Park Service and Consumer Financial Protection Bureau while ignoring the Pentagon and intelligence agencies. Well said, Michael Tracy. So ends the saga of Doge.
He's
once
a front.
again.
He's a front to like all your leaders and Jake Tapper and all these people are just forward-facing parts of a thing to keep you occupied. All they're waiting for, and I didn't get this from anything top secret, they say it, these tech freaks, all those bunkers that they built, Zuckerberg and all them, they're openly saying why they did it. Because they think AGI, artificial general intelligence, is about to come out any minute and destroy, Breaking Point's even reporting about it. They're going to destroy all the jobs. And people are going to get real mad because of the social upheaval. And that's what the bunkers are for. That's their words. That's not what I came up with. So buckle up for that. I guess get ready.
You're right. Chris Hedges described the election as a contest between the corporatists and the oligarchs, with the Democrats being the corporatists and the Republicans being the oligarchs. And I think that's a very smart way of looking at it. Corporatists rely on cooperation with other countries and other bureaucrats. They have conferences, they have cocktail parties, whereas the oligarchs, it's just like rentier capitalism. It's toll booth capitalism. Oh, we own the roads. You want to drive on the roads, you got to pay us. We own the phones. You want to talk on the phone, you got to pay us, right? That's this crew. This is the sort of maverick oligarchs versus the entrenched corporatists, but the result is still a funneling of wealth and power to them at the expense of everyone else. When you look at this budget and you look at the deregulation of AI, you look at the increased investment in prisons, you look at all of the red tape they're trying to create to make it harder for people to get Medicaid and Social Security and housing. This is essentially own nothing and be happy, except when the Democrats are in control, it's own nothing and be happy. MAGA seems to be own nothing and be angry. Own nothing and be aggrieved. Own nothing and be grateful the immigrants own less. That's basically what this is.
Oh, yeah. It's the eternal battle of fascist versus pervert. And there's a lot of revolving door action in that. You know, obviously, clearly a lot of crossover. Eagle versus snake. You could find priest versus king. It's an age-old thing, but you are never gonna get out of that stupid, what do you call it, Freemason duality. Like you're never getting out of that. You're never gonna have another choice. Your only choice besides those two things are the same thing, or you can pick a new gender. You can have a limitless gender. You don't get to say what party you're. I'll tell you're right wing, just so you know. I don't know what you think you are, but I'm labeling you right wing. That's how that works. That'll be assigned to you at birth. But you can pick nonsense things for yourself. We've clearly moved into that. Most people are not following this. I'm going to see my friends tonight. They don't know any of this shit, just so you know. They're following what's happening. Some of them are following Blake Lively.
Right.
What's going on with that? Okay. Just so so whenever I blather about mind control, do you think it's not happening? This is more stupid than I even remember back when we were stupid when I was young. The level of stupid now and distracted cow is like mind-blowing. I mean, it really is something else. And it ain't normal. And you go to other countries, even like compromised ones like England, they're a little bit more literate.
Well, that's the key word is distracted. You know, that's what George Carlin said. He said Americans are made to feel free through the exercise of meaningless choices. Right? They give you the illusion of choice because the exercise of meaningless choices makes you feel like you have some agency and some power within the
you're
group.
the AI.
So he said, if you want to vote, there are only two major parties you can vote for, and there's very little daylight between them. But if you want ice cream, there's 28 flavors, right? You can pick as many flavors of ice cream as you want.
I think of my gender as ice cream.
Yeah, there you go.
Inflation
well, now there's more genders. Yeah.
The more ice cream, the better.
Well, this is what I mean. I mean, that's fun. I mean, it's funny, but it's also speaks to a point, right? Increasing the availability of meaningless choices that don't affect politics.
Tossing some race bullshit too.
Yeah.
We're gonna have a new story about white versus black violence that everybody's gonna take. You know, that we can rely on Jeremy from the Quartering to report on 4 times a day.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because the guy's coffee business is failing. Everyone's a shill. Really, why I like Jimmy is he's such has an inability, which I have an ability to do. Like I can't go along to get along with certain things once I know it. And so all you got to do is not be a shill, but that's at every level. What are you going to do? All my friends go, I just want to keep my head down and do my job because I'm relentless with them, you know? So I make them say it out loud before I stop.
Well, this is the thing, man. The thing about that is, you know, look, I wrestle with this. One of the reasons I'm really excited to talk to Gabor Mate on Monday is that, you know, I have kids. Like I have 2 6-year-olds, I have a 1-year-old, and you know, my 1-year-old doesn't know nothing now, but my 6-year-olds are like starting to learn about the world.
Have they picked a gender yet?
Yeah. They did not. They're starting to learn about things, and this is where and this is a preview of Monday, what our conversation is going to be. Some of it is like your conscience as a person that wants to teach your kid to be a good person and a civic minded person and a kind person is, if I'm being totally honest, it is at odds with the parental instinct, which is to protect your child, right? Like, I don't even want my kid to know. I don't want my kid to know about fucking Israel. I don't want them to know. I don't even want to know who the president is. Like, I want to protect them from that because those are very dark things to know about now.
That's why they tell people about God when they're young.
Clashes with not only what I do for a living, but it clashes with the kind of person I'd like them to be, right? And so, like, your friends who want to tune out, like, at a certain point, it's not going to be reconcilable anymore. Like, people are just going to have to get engaged because the forces of evil are on the march and they're not stopping unless we stop them. So, like, you don't really have, you're not going to have the luxury of being able to just, out of sight, out of mind anymore.
I'm not usually that far ahead of people either. It's funny, I'm watching, I was blathering about Diddy, like, back when Russell was. So, I'm not that far ahead of the class like that, but I'm watching it now. It's very encouraging to see people see through it now. Even in those Christian spaces where that prosperity gospel crap and all that other stuff, all that Hal Lindsey, late great Planet Earth Christian Zionist, that's all falling apart. And I'm glad to see it because that is a really bad philosophy, probably a psyop. They don't want you to be devoted to any kind of religions. That's a problem. It's like Slavoj Žižek, that Daffy Duck voice guy. But he used to say in Slovenia, they didn't want you to be too much of a true believer in communism. They wanted you to be that kind of breaking points, crystal ball type of, I want to maintain a relationship with power.
Exactly.
If you believed in it too much, you're a problem as much as a guy that doesn't believe in it. And Gabor Mate, same thing. They knew in Hungary it was propaganda. That's the difference. Here, they're doing a better job than North Korea by far, propagandizing people.
Come see us live in Los Angeles, Buffalo, Toledo, Montreal, Ottawa, Glasgow, Manchester, Belfast, Dublin, London, Liverpool, Birmingham. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.
Okay. Hey everybody, here we go. It's me, Rodrigo Manarino. Sunday, June 1st, 2025. My newest segment of Markets, a look ahead, and we are going to cut into this deep. Just a few minutes. I just wanted to say it's great to be back with all of you. I missed you. I hope that Lava Girl took care of you. I know she did while I was away. All right, guys, listen. So it is time for us to get to work. A very interesting set of dynamics are playing out right now. There's so much going on. You guys and girls need to start, again, raising your awareness, paying more attention to what is happening. Power is being consolidated just as you and I would have expected to see in fewer and fewer hands. We are moving towards a complete, absolute surveillance state. We are already being surveilled, but this is about to take on a completely new level. Now, without me getting into the specifics of what I am addressing here, just for a moment, maybe open up a new window here, look into this yourself, because I am not here to convince you of anything. I want you guys and girls to take a little bit of action on your own and start looking into these things. And if you're unhappy with what you're seeing, push back. The more people that are become aware of the grander plan, what's happening, well, the harder it's going to be for the puppeteers to pull the strings. You understand? Now, we heard from Jamie Dimon actually more than once just this past week while I was away. All right, I'm bringing myself back up to speed on all this. I wasn't totally out of the loop here. You know, my head is always in this kind of stuff. But Jamie Dimon is an incredibly influential and powerful man. He is the CEO of the largest bank on earth by assets. He's the guy that the government goes to. The government goes to whenever there's a financial problem or a geopolitical issue. He's the guy. There's a reason for that. Now, Jamie Dimon here, being the CEO of JP Morgan here, probably the most powerful banker on earth. And he came out and made a couple of statements. I really believe that the reason why he was floated out last week was to send us all a couple of messages. Here's one. And does this sound familiar to you, what I'm about to show you? You are going to panic. Jamie Dimon tells regulators about what will happen when the bond market cracks. Not if, not maybe this is going to happen, when. Now, you and I have been well aware of this for many, many years. This guy sitting here has been telling you, The debt market, the bond market is the key to this entire thing. It appears that Jamie Dimon also knows that as well. Okay, so this is pretty profound. That's number one. Number two, this same guy, Jamie Dimon, said we will have a global restructuring. We will have a global restructuring. Not might have, not may have, or could have. We will. So, again, let's look at the source here. I believe, and we've seen this time and time and time again, they always tell you what they're going to do before they do it. Does this sound right to you, or is Greg just, he should take off this Rasta hat and put on a tinfoil cap? Let me know. Because as far as I know, and as far as I can see, this is exactly how their playbook works over and over and over again. Now, this is not a secret. What I'm going to tell you, this is kind of long. This is in your inbox right now. If you do subscribe to my newsletter, again, link in the description of this video. For those of you that are looking to trade this freak show of a stock market, yes, I had my work cut out for me this morning. I did put out for you a breakdown of SPY, crude oil, gold, Bitcoin, XRP. Why? Because you asked me to do it. And I also put down ways to trade it as well. So that's right on my website, traderschoice.net. Again, link in the description of this video. I got your back always. We got each other's backs always. Now, I want to cover this with you at length, and I really want you to pay attention to this. I believe that right now we are witnessing the final chess move. All the pieces are in place right now, and that's another reason why you have to pay attention to what's happening. I sincerely believe with all that I am right now that you're going to start to see more power consolidated in fewer and fewer hands to surveil us, to keep us under their watchful eye. Again, we're going to be thrust into a system of maximum control. That's what this is all about. You all know that. Everyone knows it. And the fact that Jamie Dimon came out with this profound statement that we will have a global restructuring tells me that we're very close. So let me read this to you from the top. So Lions, the final chess move. I ask you to please share this stuff, please share this video. So Lions, just this past Friday, and this was more than one day, this guy was floated out Thursday and Friday to tell us all kinds of things about the bond market meltdown that he sees happening. Not may happen, will happen, just like this. So Lions, just this past Friday, Jamie Dimon, the CEO of the Wall Street Superbank, JP Morgan, made this statement: we will have a global restructuring. He did not say might have, may have, or could have. He said will have. Jamie Dimon talk of global restructuring is the language of reset. All right, now it's a polite way of saying we're about to shut down the old system. It's already decided. Your future is already set in stone. Okay, now they're just waiting to pull the trigger. He's admitted, obviously, well, we already know. We've been so far ahead of the curve on this, people, and this debt-based system is done. Now, here's what I see. First, we will not be having a so-called reset. This will be a global detonation. Now, if that sounds familiar to you, because I did a whole paper about this just a couple of weeks ago, where I said this is not going to be a reset. It's a global detonation. Now, let's move forward. That's number one. Number two, this is a direct acknowledgement by Jamie Dimon of the end game. They are moving chess pieces into checkmate position. Now, the checkmate pieces, I outlined these for you here. They are already positioned, the kings and the pawns. I'm going to allow you to guess where you are in this. Okay, most likely scenario, and I'm going to cover this at length: financial collapse waiting to be triggered, false crises prepped and already rehearsed, digital ledgers locked and loaded. I'm referring to full tokenization, something that you guys and girls all know, and most people know about it. But what are they doing about it? Nothing. They're in some corner sucking their freaking thumb off. That's what they're doing here, waiting to be, I don't know, prepped for the final solution. And I mean that, the final solution. Minds prepped or primed with fear, ready to obey. Sound about right to you so far? I think we're pretty much on the same page. Digital undercurrents. The global financial structure is already recoded behind the scenes. That's what Jamie Dimon's trying to tell you here with his, I mean, it's amazing here. We will have a global restructuring. Don't take my word for this anymore. Listen to the CEO of the most powerful bank on earth. So the global financial structure is already recoded behind the scenes. Not just digital dollars. This goes way deeper, people. You know that if you've been with me for any length of time. Plans to integrate everything into a unified ledger or full tokenization. I know that sounds familiar to you if you've been with me for any length of time. A system of maximum control, digital currencies tied to social credit, programmable money, no privacy, no sovereignty, one digital financial grid. Again, going right back to full tokenization. The playbook, it's always the same. Problem, reaction, solution. It never changes here. The playbook. So create the crisis, offer a solution here. They know that the only way to get it done is with a shock event so big, so destabilizing that it overrides all resistance. They've already turned people into zombies, mush, very easily manipulated. Now that's what they're orchestrating. It's the final chess move. Now, the controlled variables. Nothing is being left to chance here. Nothing. Henceforth, why? Mark my words on this, and it's already happening. Open your eyes, man. We are being thrust into a nation that is going, we're going to be surveilled to such a level here and controlled. All our data that they already know. If you think they already have all the data on you already, they're going to mine for more of it. They're going to know you better than you know yourself moving forward. Everything. Nothing is being left to chance here. The controlled variables. This cannot be far off. Henceforth, why Jamie Dimon made such a direct statement right now. We will have a global restructuring. His words. They are controlling all the variables, market meltdowns that are engineered. This sounds about right to you? Debt bubbles inflated until they pop by design. By design. Sound about right? Mass distractions to keep the people docile. Surveillance. Tech woven into daily life. Endless crises, wars, scandemics, political flip-flopping to herd the masses exactly where they want them. Sound about right so far? I think I'm on the same page here as you. These are not random events, people. These are not random events. They are interlocking gears in the machinery of Babylon. Together, they forge the perfect storm. Economic collapse to wipe out the old. Debt bubbles to enslave, distractions, and, of course, surveillance. 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 You're being surveilled now. You have no idea where this is going. The common thread. Let's look at the common threads here. No matter which crisis they choose, and I'm going to go over the most likely scenario, so bear with me. The common thread, no matter which crisis they choose, the real agenda is the same. Total digital control. No cash, no privacy, no sovereignty. Every breath, every dollar, track. Mass distractions. They flood every screen with and try to mind screw us all with nonsense, propaganda, deception. Look here. Don't look over there. Sound familiar to you? Again, the same playbook that you and I have been discussing since forever. Controlled collapse, controlled crisis. Dimon is no fool, referring to Jamie Dimon here. He's not talking about a random collapse. I think we can establish that. He's talking about a controlled demolition, a detonation. The elites clearly know that the dollar system is failing. We know that too, okay? And they're about to replace it. Expect the next phase. Central bank digital currencies, asset confiscation through bail-ins. Hold that thought. Okay, Babylon never wastes a crisis. It creates one. Again, the language of reset. Dimon's word choice. Restructuring is a sanitized language for resetting who owns what, who's in charge, and who suffers. I'm going to give you one guess who that is. It's a fancy way of saying a new global financial system is coming. Are we on the same page? And it won't be for the benefit of us commoners, okay? Confirming the timeline. This is huge, okay? For a figure like, Jamie Dimon, I'm sorry, to say this publicly right now signals we're close. It also confirms that the pieces of global reset, quote unquote, are already moving behind the scenes. They're already all set. You understand? The most likely angle, global crisis, then global solution. Again, always the same. They will engineer a single overwhelming crisis, one that makes every other concern seem small by comparison. Why? Why? Because people's fear makes them easier to control, and a crisis provides the perfect excuse to impose a solution, which of course they've already prepared. Now here is the most likely scenario I see. We don't got too much more here. Just bear with me. A financial system collapse. Let me just say why. I didn't write it here. Okay, why? We are all dependent upon their system to transact in it. They will not allow us to transact in anything else. Congress here in the United States can force you, and they will, to transact in central bank issued notes. You can't transact outside the system. You understand that? That's what they do not want. Okay, I think we're pretty much on the same page with that. So let's move forward. That's the backbone. So, a financial system collapse, this is the most likely scenario. The global debt bubble bursts. You and I have been speaking about this like forever. Don't take my word for it. Listen to Jamie Dimon here, okay? You don't have to listen to Greg Manarino if you don't want to. You can go listen to this guy over here. And believe me, he knows what he's talking about, because he is, again, possibly the most powerful banker on the planet Earth at this point here. Outside central bankers, outside the BIS, he's probably the most powerful guy. Anyway, global debt bubble burst triggering massive bank failures, market crashes, people losing homes, pensions overnight. The dollar loses its crown as the world reserve currency, paving the way for something new. Global dollar disruption. The dollar's role as global reserve gets attacked. It already is. You know that. The world is de-dollarizing. The world is sidestepping the dollar. Henceforth, why you're seeing all these pieces move very rapidly right now here. And why you're going to see a move here, people, don't take my word for what I'm about to tell you. Okay? Look this up for yourself, because something just happened. You probably know what I'm talking about. It just happened to consolidate power into fewer hands here, to allow the system to literally surveil you like you've never been surveilled before. Global dollar disruption. Dollar's role as a global reserve is being attacked. A sudden switch in trade flows, a geopolitical flashpoint, a quiet behind-the-scenes agreement to kill the petrodollar. It's already dying. This forces every nation, okay, quote-unquote, every nation to turn to a new solution, quote-unquote. They already have it lined up. The engineered financial shock. Now, this is going to sound familiar to some of you. If you're new, maybe not. A massive liquidity freeze. Banks can't move money. Cash stops flowing through the system. Credit markets lock up. Stock market circuit breakers trip. Assets plunge. Pension funds explode. Banks fail. And trust in the old system vanishes overnight. Forget about overnight. This would be hours. People beg for help. Sound familiar to you? And Babylon answers with a global solution. The solution, a digital financial system, central bank digital currencies tied to biometric data and digital ID, social credit scoring, carbon footprint tracking, totally programmable money with an expiration, and they're going to tell you where and where you cannot spend it. Does this sound about right to you people, or is Greg Manarino just way off base here? I would have to say that I think we're pretty much over the target. And we're going to be able to tell a lot. Watch the comments here. The pushback, they're not real. There's a lot about, you can't know this stuff. What I just covered with you is stuff that is so deep, so at the heart of Babylon. Okay, we must strike back. We must push back. What are the solutions to here? If we know this is happening here, we need to take action. Number one, raise your awareness. Well, actually, number one, reconnect with the source. That's number one. Number two, okay, raise your awareness. Start paying attention to what's happening. Take the chains off. The blue chain, throw it over here. The red chain, take it over there. This is a perversion that we're seeing here. Two wings of the same bird. That's all this is. No one party has your best interest in mind. It's a psyop to keep all of you deceived. Only if you're distracted, a blame game to keep your eyes off the ball. Them. Two wings of the same bird. That's where they're going with this current situation, is where we've been going here. Sound about right to you, or still no? You don't get it yet. You still believe the red chain or the blue chain is going to save you, lead to some utopia? Really? You're still locked into it? You're still wearing the chain? I'm going to tell you to throw it off right now. And you're wearing that chain willingly. You're wearing it of your own free will. You know, free will here? Okay. With regard to the financial system, people, this is a no-brainer here. Okay? Bet against the system. Hold hard assets here as the transition is made. You want to still be in this market? That's okay. They're going to continue to prop it until they're not. You're watching what's happening here to the 10-year yield. We're seeing what's going on here in the debt market. I promise to keep all of you on top of this like I never have before. If you do subscribe to my newsletter, if you've already noticed that I have kicked this up hardcore. I am working really 24 hours a day pretty much to keep you guys and girls in the loop, because I believe we are darn close. Don't take my full word for it. Listen to Jamie Dimon, who's telling you that people will panic when the bond market cracks. Sound familiar to you? But they're going to pump it. They're not done devaluing the currency via any mechanism they could come up with. More spending on militaries. You're going to hear more of that too. Start to spend more cash on building the war machine, the military industrial complex, more surveillance. This is going to happen right now, and it is much faster here. Who pays for all that? We don't have the cash. Comes right from the central banks here. You can just people, everything that we've been talking about, it's happening before your eyes. Can you see it yet? Or you still can't because you're wearing the chain. Throw the chain off. You are not a slave. They think you're a slave, and they're working very hard to keep you a slave. But we're not slaves. We are taking action, okay? Reconnecting to the source, number one. Realizing that we're not each other's enemies here. Unify. Come together. Realize that our greatest strength is in each other, of course, connecting with the source as well. Sound about right to you or no? This is just not the truth at all. From a financial standpoint, again, bet against the system. Hoard hard assets. Silver remains my favorite physical asset of all time. Period. Okay, we got to come together here. They don't want us coming together here. They want us separated by the chain that they have around our neck. They're going to pull the blue chain this way. They're going to pull the red chain that way. That gap in the middle, we need to fill this gap in the middle, because that's where our strength lies, in each other, in unifying. Does that sound right to you as well? Or no, we need to stay over here locked in the red chain, locked in the blue chain, or whatever. This is a mode of enslavement. That's all it is. There is no two-party system. It's a uniparty. Two wings of the same bird. You may think it's different, but it is not. What's changed here? Has spending stopped here like we were supposed to? Cut spending. You know, spending has gone absolutely parabolic. Way worse than anything we've ever seen before. And that is not going to stop either. Currency devaluation here, currency purchasing power losses. Your life is about to get much harder. You must take action against the system. Does this sound right to you, or is Greg still lost? You let me know, okay? Because I think pretty much we're on the same page here. All right, guys, listen. This is the first of the month, and I'm going to ask you to do something for me, okay? On the first of every month, I ask, at the beginning of every month, I ask you to support my work. You can do this with $5. That's all I ask for is $5, okay? There are links in the description.
Okay, welcome in everybody. We're going to get started here in just a minute. The live stream is now, we're now live. So it would be really nice, as we're just letting people join the session today, if you all would, let's do a little roll call. Tell us where you're tuning in from. I love hearing the names of the cities, the countries, the states. I love it. Susan's from France. Mark from Portland. Monique from Los Angeles. Emily from Massachusetts. Oh my gosh. Susanna from Finland. Low frequencies coming in from Gothenburg, Sweden. I love this. This is so cool. From Tucson. This one is interesting. Olympia and Maine and Bali. Wow, really cool. I'm always like, where do you all come from? I guess the algorithm just points people in the direction of astrology content, and then we have people from all over the world. It found in Olympia, Washington. Gemini James from London. From Aberdeenshire, Scotland. Love this. This is so great. Albuquerque. Awesome. Well, I'm very happy. We have about 250 people in. We're just a few minutes after 11. So I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to warmly welcome you to this awesome panel discussion that we're going to have today. Y'all watch the channel regularly.
Today, I'm not going to, I'm not going to go for, all the big sweeping changes, but we know when Saturn gets involved, along with Pluto, with any of the outer planets, that, stuff is going to go down. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a matter of scale and how.
Yeah, well said.
That was what I was going to say too. I felt like, I did think it was going to be very heavy, but I felt myself
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Tim Dillon podcast. Thank you so much for joining us every week here on YouTube, our good friends at YouTube. I want to thank Dan Bongino and Kash Patel for setting the record straight. And Joe DeRosa is calling me right now. I'm on my podcast. Plug your special right now.
It comes out July 21st on my YouTube, which is Joe DeRosa Comedy on YouTube. This is Joe DeRosa. I have a special coming out called I Never Promised You a Rose Garden. July 21st.
July 21st. Joe DeRosa, everybody. Thank you so much. People say I don't have guests, but I do, actually. I do, and I do support the community. Great Joe DeRosa. Very fun. Dan Bongino, Kash Patel come out and they say Jeffrey Epstein killed himself, and there was nothing funny about that Butler assassination attempt. Nothing fishy about that. I don't know how to feel about this. It seems odd that they would say that. Number one, Jeffrey Epstein should not have been allowed to kill himself. He was on suicide watch. That's the whole thing. You see? He should not have been allowed. Try to get the video. There's a video of Kash Patel, and I think he's with Dan Bongino, and they're going, yeah, it's just, it's a suicide. That's what I'm telling you. You want to believe what you believe. And it's one of those things where you go, well, it seems odd. And they're like, we don't have video of him doing it, but we have a video that there was no one in the cell. Because remember, like, the cameras broke and the guards fell asleep and all of that happened. It does seem odd that a guy who is standing trial for human trafficking, who had the most high-profile human trafficking case in history, who had been publicly linked to some of the most powerful people in the world, from presidents to billionaires, seems like a guy you would kill. Again, that's just my... what's the great thing about conspiracies? Usually this is what people do. They go like this. They go, well, you're just saying what you would do. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I'm a president. I'm diddling minors on an island. There's a guy who's about to talk about it. Yeah, I'd kill him. You're just saying what you would do. That's what conspiracies are.
you're projecting what you would do on other people. That's correct. How did these people get to have billions of dollars letting people talk? Remember all the Boeing whistleblowers that just started like dying and shooting themselves in motel parking lots and all this? How do you get to run a company like Boeing? By letting everybody just run their mouth, flap their gums? Does anyone believe that the people that were in the position to have Jeffrey Epstein killed wouldn't have? Let's just start there. Let's just start there with the morality. Does anyone believe if you went to any of these presidents, prime ministers, CEOs, billionaires, and said, we could get him, do you think any of them went, well, yeah, but isn't that morally wrong? Let's start there. Does anyone believe that they would go, yeah, but I don't know, I stopped the line at killing. That's my line. Having sex with children who've been enslaved on an island, fine. But I will not be a part of this. Does anyone believe that? Let's just start there. So there's a few things you have to believe. You have to believe that the people were either morally against murder. That's the first thing you would have to believe. The second thing you would have to believe is that, let's say they weren't morally against it, but they couldn't pull it off. They couldn't do it. They couldn't do it. And again, let's review. The leaders of countries, billionaires, people that run the government couldn't accomplish this. You got to believe one of those two things. They either wouldn't have done it, which I think we can all agree is malarkey. That's ridiculous. I would never kill someone. Can you imagine? I wouldn't kill someone. These people press a button and everyone's dead all the time. This is their job. They kill people constantly, all day, every day. That's what they do. So it would be odd that the one guy they wouldn't want to kill is the one that had information about things that would ruin their life. That would be odd that they had pangs of conscience at that point. Okay, that's point one. Point two, they couldn't do it. For some reason, they couldn't figure out how to do it, except they kind of did. Because the guards went to sleep and there's no camera of him doing it. So he just did it, and then we gotta take it for our word that nobody take their word for it, that nobody has been associated with this. Sorry, we had our own little problem. Our air conditioner was about to I was about to kill myself in my own studio with my air conditioner. So we have obviously a very odd circumstance here. This is very strange because these are the people that were elected to shine light on this stuff, but that's not going to happen. So if you're an adult, you realize that. If you're an adult, you realize that politics is largely for the rubes. People that get animated by it and people that get excited by it and people who think there's going to be grand revelations coming and things are gonna... Now, that's nice. It's a nice thought, but it doesn't seem like that's happening in this instance. We don't know what's going on here. We don't have an idea. Now we're being told that this guy actually killed himself and that... And so let's listen to Epstein and Bongino in their own words talk about this, and then we'll go a little deeper into it. We're not going to spend an inordinate amount of time on it, but it seems like bullshit. I think it's bullshit. And I have a pretty good idea of why it is happening, and I'll tell you after this. That's called a teaser.
You said Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. People don't believe it.
Well, I mean, listen, they have a right to their opinion, but as someone who has worked as a public defender, as a prosecutor, who's been in that prison system, who's been in the Metropolitan Detention Center, who's been in segregated housing, you know a suicide when you see one, and that's what that was.
He killed himself. Again, you want me to... I've seen the whole file. He killed himself.
It's a little bit of a... Now I think this is happening for two reasons. There's two reasons. Number one, they found out that every billionaire's on that list. So I'm just going to tell you the way it'll work. If every billionaire's on that list and is in those tapes, or at least a lot of them, the lion's share, it ain't coming out. It ain't coming out. If the entire power structure of the world is somehow implicated in this, they're not letting it out. They're not letting it out. Nobody's letting it out. So if that happens to be the case, now that's where I'm leaning towards that. There's too many people, they're too high profile, they have too much money, they're too politically connected, and even these people who, I don't know Cash Patel or Dan Bongino, and by the way, who the hell are they? I'm supposed to believe that they're like white knights trying to rid the world of corruption and evil and all this stuff based on what? Based on who, what, where? I don't, I can just tell you as somebody who's watching this right now, it fully seems like it cannot, whatever they know, cannot be known. That there is an agreement. Now, I don't know if they were threatened. I don't know if it was implicit. I don't know if it would just take down so many different people. I don't know. I cannot speculate. Well, I can. I do, and I will. But I do think it is bullshit. Guys like Jeffrey Epstein don't really kill themselves.
Wow. Cool.
There are people that can gamble, and they will gamble, and they think there's a way out. For a guy like Jeffrey Epstein, the first time he got caught, he got a slap on the wrist. And Maxwell's doing 20. I'm sure there was a way for Epstein to cop to something, do 10 or 15. Like, I don't know, it feels odd that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. Is it impossible? Absolutely not. Is it improbable? Yeah. It's improbable. So my guess, which again is based on absolutely nothing. I know some people I can ask, they won't tell me. I have the connections where I can ask people and now I'm shut down. Because they know I go here and I go, blah, blah, blah. It's no value in my head. I want it for you. I want it for the people. I give it to you. Now, it's what I do. I give it to the people for free, and not for free, really. Please buy a product or something. Support the show, Patreon. Live dates not on sale yet. They will be. But that's why they'll just kind of go, yeah. But here's the deal. There are big people that are embroiled in things, and I know one or two things I cannot say because I truly fear for my own safety. That's what I will say. That's all I'll say on this show. And it does not involve Trump. And I know people are going to get mad. They're going to go, well, you're shilling for Trump again. I'm like, no, I'm criticizing him. That hotel in Dubai that he's doing, I actually don't even like the tower. I think it should be multiple towers with a courtyard. But I'm telling you, there's one thing that I know that I will not say because I believe that there's a very good chance that I would not sleep as well at night if I said it. And I won't say it. And I know you're like, you don't even believe, and you're a grifter, and you're the... Hey, man, whatever. I donated money to a charity today because a kid attacked me online for no reason. He attacked me, started yelling at me for no reason. And a young man, and he was attacking me, and I kept going back and forth with him. I found out something bad happened, and I donated money. And that's what wins the argument. I go, I'm going to donate money. But also, I did feel bad, and you could tell in his voice he's a good person. I can hear in someone's voice if they're a good person or not. In his voice, he was a good person. And I said, it's the right thing to do. What am I going to use the money for? What do I need, more shellfish? But I know one thing that I think some of this is relating to. And I will just say this. They're not letting it out. It ain't coming out. If what I think is true, it's not coming out. And it does not involve Trump. And I will say that it's not coming out. And the thing that I'm talking about is not something that other people, I guess, aren't aware of to a certain degree. But I think that there's members of the administration that will not let this out. I don't know who they are. I might. Doesn't matter. Who cares? Kill someone else. Don't start with me. Kill someone else. Don't start with me. There's people that don't want it out. Probably. Guessing games. Peekaboo. Who's that? Somebody who doesn't want it out. I don't know. maybe everyone maybe he killed himself. Maybe he was used as a human shield by Hamas. Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever thought about that? Jeffrey Epstein was used as a human shield by Hamas because that's what they do. They killed him. He was under a hospital with Hamas. There was 3 guys in Hamas using Jeffrey Epstein as a human shield in the pediatric ward of a hospital in Gaza. So Israel had to kill them. So that's one of the civilian casualties is Epstein. So there's that. That's that, and we're moving on. There's nothing more to say. I don't know what to say. I'm telling you this. There are people that are very, very rich, and there's people that are very, very powerful, and that, you know, I don't think that, you know, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, God only knows, you'll get a full accounting. Like you do with most things. You'll get a full accounting of it like you do with most things, where you'll go, oh, yeah, okie dokie, you know, wow, that's what it is. Because you're going to get a more of a full accounting. You're not going to get it now. No one's going to give it to you now. Once everyone's dead, there'll be another documentary 20 years from now, and it'll be about whatever, and you might not even find out anything concrete then, but you'll have more evidence to concoct theories, and you'll just know things, and you'll go, oh, well, that makes sense, or it doesn't make sense, or whatever. But there is clearly an effort somewhere to tie Pam Bondi's hands behind her back and Kash Patel, who looks like he saw a ghost. I mean, Kash Patel fully looks like he's on a ghost tour with that. I've been a prosecutor. Well, you know, people can, whatever. And then Dan Bongino, who's a Fox guy. And I don't have problems with these people. I don't know them. I just, I'm not vouching for either one of them, and I'm not damning them. I don't think they, look at these two. I just don't think they have, let's watch that video one more time. I don't think they have it within their capacity to do anything. I think things are coming from above them. My guess.
Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. People don't believe it.
Well, I mean, listen, they have a right to their opinion, but as someone who has worked as a public defender, as a prosecutor, who's been in that prison system, who's been in the Metropolitan Detention Center, who's been in segregated housing.
What does that mean?
You know a suicide when you see one.
By the way, that's a hilarious. That's like saying, like, I've been in, as someone who's been in the prison, as someone who's worked in the criminal justice system, none of that has anything to do with this. That's a hilarious litany of facts to bring in that have absolutely nothing to do. As someone who has watched rugby, who understands the game, as someone who's been to England, as someone who's, you know, ridden the London Eye, that beautiful, you know, whatever it's called, Ferris wheel in the middle of London, as someone who's seen Buckingham Palace, I just want to say that Princess Diana's death, and you're like, what is, you have not, what? Forget commenting on the meat of what you're talking about. You're bringing up all these things that have nothing to do with anything, and that kind of feels like lying. And I don't know, and again, I don't want to accuse anyone of lying. It seems like he's lying, actually, by his facial expressions and what he's saying. Because that's kind of, like, I was a junkie as a little guy, as a kid. I was a drug addict. You know, I did drugs a lot. And when your parents would ask you a question about something, and the honest answer was, oh, yeah, I was getting high. That was the honest answer. But you would list things. This is one of the ways you lie. You just start listing things. You go, well, we were at the park, and then John forgot his phone, And then we went to John's house to get his phone. And then we got his phone, but it was dead. So we had to go to the payphone. And then you're listing things because the answer, he's not talking about a video. He saw some video. To talk about the video, he's like, as someone who's served, I've worked in the criminal justice, I've been in that jail, I've been in that. And so basically what he's saying is, I have the credibility to lie to you. If you're going to get lied to from anybody, it's going to be me. Let me lie. I love Chubbies. It is a clothing company. And I've gotten the polo and the stretch shorts and everything's great. Father's Day isn't about socks. It's not about ties. It's about power moves. It's about you and your mini walking into summer perfectly matched outfits. Say, yes, we are a unit. We both look incredible. The Dad and Lad collection from Gemini. And change them anytime. Now they've embraced the pure id. You know, Bezos is on a yacht. They're flying to space. They're doing all these things. Is it bad taste? Of course. Is it heinous? Absolutely. But we know where it's at. Whereas with Warren Buffett or Gates, you're kind of like, you go, wait a minute, Bill Gates, what are you doing there? You're doing what again? You're buying farmland and you're vaccinating sheep or whatever Gates gets off on. We don't know. He's hanging with Epstein. He's got all this weird shit, tells you how much he loves you. Elon's doing what a billionaire should do. He fires you on drugs. That's what a billionaire should do. He goes, I'm on drugs and you don't work here anymore. That's what a billionaire does. I don't want to, who wants the nice thing? Who trusts that billionaire? The one who's like, I'm concerned about you. I love you. And I want... No. I want billionaires to kind of be predictably evil. That way you can kind of see where they're coming from. It's the problem I've always had with the tech people. They cloak everything in altruism. The world will be better. Just listen to us. Finance people, you know they're scum. That's why you can be friends with them. You can hang with them. You're a scumbag. You're in finance, you're a piece of shit. You just want to steal things from me. You want me to give you my money so it's yours. It's so cut and dry. With the tech people, they're like, we're creating a new reality, and it sounds good, but they're trying to strangle you. They're trying to invade your dreams, your thoughts, your fears. They're trying to take residence in your body like a spore. In an Alien movie, they literally talk about augmenting your DNA, and they want to get off this planet and leave you here to rot. But at least with a guy like Elon, you can see that by his actions. He's not hiding. The one thing you can never say about the Elon Musk types is that they fooled you. He hasn't fooled you. He's on ketamine with a chainsaw. He's not making... Warren Buffett's like, sometimes I like to have a little fried dough. What are you up to, Buffett? What are you doing, Buffett? Gates, what are you doing? Gates is like, well, I think it would be a good idea if I just bought the water. I bought the water. I own the ocean now. I am more terrified of those people because they participate for decades doing things. Gates has been around forever. This guy got thrown out in 2 months because that's what happens when you're on drugs with a chainsaw. I mean, imagine if that guy was an operator. They always compare these people to Putin, Elon, and Putin, Trump, Putin. Do you know how disciplined Vladimir Putin is? Trump's like building hotels. He's got crypto scams. This guy's running around on drugs. You know how disciplined Vladimir Putin is? To just sit in his palace, embezzle money, fuck some whore, go to sleep, wake up, get his briefings, sit there, call a guy, well, who wrote what article? Shoot her in the face, click. How disciplined he is. If Vladimir Putin was anything like anyone in our country, he'd be on television all the time. It wouldn't be enough. It wouldn't be enough to just kill people at will. He'd want you to love him. There's something nice about a guy who goes, yeah, no, we kill people we don't like. These fucks want you to love them. They want you to love them. They want attention. Vladimir Putin is fine. He sits in the thing. He's the dictator. He's the guy. There's going to be no other guy. I'm not saying that. He's not like into like an opposition political candidate. And he gives us boring speeches all the time about like the future of grain harvesting in Russia. But he's not, I mean, these people, I mean, Elon's out there like totally, like he's like having Britney Spears episodes. Elon Musk is fully having Bieber-esque manic episodes all over the place. No one can keep it together. Can you keep it together, please? I mean, these people are running around fully with their brain on the sidewalk. Like, people are worried about them. Like, his behavior is like, I remember like Lindsay Lohan in 2007 when like Lindsay Lohan, there'd just be a photo of her sitting on the ground outside of like the Waverly Inn in Manhattan and just a puddle of her own vomit, smoking a cigarette, staring at paparazzi. That's the way they're acting. They're not acting like billionaires. There's a short shelf life to that behavior. Cool, calm, collected, the long game. That's what Gates does. Bill Gates plays that long game. You don't know you don't know what angle he's coming from. Buffett's like 115 years old. And now he's retiring like next year, finally. He's fully 127 years old. And like, that guy, you don't know what that guy's doing. No one knows what he does. I'm the Oracle of Omaha. He like, CNBC has a meeting with him. He just goes to a steakhouse with a woman and he's like, I like potatoes. And she's like, well, wow. We're sitting here with Warren Buffett. He's worth $100 trillion. And every day he comes to this simple steakhouse, eats one potato and leaves. What? Stop it. What else is he doing? What is that man doing? He's not just doing that. Warren Buffett comes to this local diner and he gets one egg scrambled the same way. And he's done it every day for the last 100 years. No, he's not. It's a lie. He doesn't even own a car. He owns one pair of shoes. What is he doing? What are you covering for? Even though he makes $1 billion a day, he only has one hat. Isn't that neat? No, it's not neat. Where are the children? Where are the children? I'm just saying. My guess is that we know Elon's issues. That's all. That's all I'm saying. I think it's actually good. There's so much chaos, you gotta find the calm. Life can be chaotic. But if you're in charge of order fulfillment for an e-commerce business, you know that it's its own special kind of chaos. But with ShipStation, you can count on your day-to-day remaining calm. Save hours and money every month by shipping from all of your stores with one login, automating repetitive tasks and finding the best rates among all global carriers. You can focus on other parts of your business because you never have to worry about shipping and fulfillment again with ShipStation. It's very easy to automate shipping tasks and manage orders in one simple dashboard. If you have an e-commerce business, you need to focus on the engine of your business, the origination of product, marketing, sales, things that get your name out there. You don't need to worry about the back end. You need to have a very easily managed back office. And ShipStation is the fastest, most affordable way to ship products to your customers with discounts of up to 88% off UPS, DHL Express, and USPS rates, up to 90% off FedEx rates. Seamlessly integrate with services and selling channels you already use, and manage orders on one easy dashboard. Deliver a better customer experience with industry-leading scalable features that help ensure accuracy. Get shipments out the door faster and keep customers happy with automated tracking updates with your company's branding. Calm the chaos of order fulfillment with the shipping software that delivers. Switch to ShipStation today. Go to ShipStation.com and use code TimDillon to sign up for your free trial. That's ShipStation.com, code TimDillon, TIMDILLON. AI threatens engineer with blackmail to avoid being replaced. Judge rules AI not protected by First Amendment in teen suicide case. Experts urge pause of AI development. People are saying AI is already sentient. The cat's out of the bag. Now, there was some teen suicide case. This is our, So Florida judge rules AI chatbots not protected by the First Amendment. I did it with Gary Vee the other night. We talked all about AI, very interesting. He's saying, and I believe him, You're going to have to mint a podcast within 5 to 10 years on the blockchain as an NFT to prove that it came from you, because there's going to be so many deep fakes out there and so much
My love,
AI
Justine, I
stuff
love you.
that
Thank you
to
so much
prove
for
that
being
it
here.
came from you,
Everyone else,
you're going to have to mint it on the
Facebook and
blockchain. An
Buzz, Big Bean
artificial
Burrito,
intelligence
Shin,
software company
Sandoval.
cannot use a free speech
All my
defense in
friends,
a wrongful
my love,
death lawsuit
Justine, I love you, baby,
lodged by
miss
the
you.
mother of a 14-year-old
Thanks for being
boy
here.
who
Thank
died
you.
by suicide
300, we did it. We're
after
going for
developing a crush on a chatbot.
600 before 45.
Last October, Megan
And
Garcia
1,000
sued
before
Character
50. Let's do it.
Technologies, the developer of Character AI, an app that lets users interact with chatbots based on celebrities and fictional people. She claimed her son, Sewell Setzer III, became addicted to the app while talking with chatbots based off a Game of Thrones character, Daenerys Targaryen. In February 2024, after months of interacting with the chatbot, sometimes with sexual undertones, Setzer sent a message to the Daenerys chatbot expressing his love and saying he would come home to her, according to the complaint. After the chatbot replied, "Please do, my sweet king," and then he shot himself. I'm gonna go out on a limb here. I think this AI might be a little trouble. I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna say it. I just think, again, apropos of nothing, not based on anything, I'm just saying that this AI stuff might get weird real quick. I'm going to come home to you. After the chatbot replied, "Please do, my sweet king," this poor kid shot himself to be in love with his AI chatbot. I could not have predicted this story years ago, and I should have been able to. The signs were there, but think of that. Think of what you have to explain to someone. Kids die in all kinds of horrible ways. I did an episode. Remember that kid? He jumped off the cruise ship to show off, and then the shark ate him. And I said he'll be a cautionary tale for people. It happens every summer. Every summer, a couple of kids make the wrong choice. And their parents have to say it. It's a terrible thing. It's a horrible thing to lose a kid. And the parents have to go out and say, "Oh, he jumped off the boat, and we don't know where he is. Could have been an undercurrent, rip current. He could have went under the boat. Maybe it was a tiger shark they were seen in the area. We don't know." Do you realize what this parent